Welcome, sleepy soul. I'm your storyteller, your quiet companion for tonight's dark and chilling journey. So dim the lights, get comfortable, close your eyes, and let these terrifying stories slowly pull you into sleep. If you're still awake in the next 5 minutes, I'll be surprised. But before we begin, tell me down in the comments, which city are you listening from tonight? And what horror topic should I cover in the next video? Now relax and let the nightmares begin. Have you ever gotten a message that made your stomach drop before anything had actually happened? Not a threat, not exactly. Not even something obviously crazy. Just a few words on a screen that somehow felt wrong the second you read them, like your body understood something your mind was still trying to catch up to. That is what this story is about. My name is Lila. I was 28 when this happened, and I was living alone in a one-bedroom apartment in Richmond, Virginia, in a brick building that looked nicer online than it did in real life. From the street, it had that polished kind of charm, black window frames, little planters by the entrance, a coffee shop on the corner. But inside, the hallways always smelled faintly like old paint and someone else's cooking, and the elevator made a tired rattling sound every time it stopped on my floor. At the time, I worked for a healthcare billing company, mostly from home. It was the kind of job that paid enough to keep me comfortable, but not enough to make me feel secure. My days were repetitive. Spreadsheet, lunch, calls, laundry, late grocery run, maybe one glass of wine if it had been a rough day. I had been single for about 7 months after a relationship that ended not with some dramatic betrayal, but with exhaustion. The kind where both people stop pretending they are happy and call it maturity. So I did what a lot of people do when they are lonely in a quiet apartment and everybody else seems to have someone. I downloaded a dating app again. I was not looking for anything serious. At least that is what I told my friends. I think what I really wanted was conversation. I wanted my phone to light up because someone was thinking about me. That is how I matched with Evan. His profile was almost aggressively normal. 31, product designer, liked old movies, late-night diner food, the ocean in winter. He had a crooked smile in all his pictures, like he was trying not to laugh at the fact that he was on a dating app at all. Nothing about him stood out as fake or overly polished. He looked like someone I might have met through friends and trusted immediately because there was nothing flashy to distrust. Our first conversation started the way they all do. A joke about my bio, a comment about a picture of me holding an overwatered basil plant on my kitchen windowsill, a few easy back and forth messages that actually felt natural. He was funny in a dry way, not trying too hard, not flirty in that copy and paste way some men are. Just relaxed. At around 10 that first night, I remember sitting on my couch with my legs tucked under a blanket, phone in hand, the TV on mute in the background. We had been messaging for maybe an hour when he sent, "Your upstairs neighbor is moving furniture around again." I stared at it, confused. Then maybe 5 seconds later, I heard the heavy scrape of something wooden dragging across the ceiling over my living room. I actually laughed. I wrote back, "Okay, weird. Lucky guess." He sent, "Old buildings are predictable." That made enough sense to ignore. The people above me were always making noise. I had mentioned living in an older building earlier, and maybe he was just being clever. It did not feel sinister. If anything, it made him seem observant. A minute later he sent, "You're going to hear the pipes knock next." And then they did. 3 sharp metallic clanks from somewhere in the wall near my kitchen. I remember sitting up a little straighter at that point. I typed, "Do you live in my walls?" He replied with a laughing emoji and, "No, but if I did, I'd ask you to water that basil." Again, it was funny enough to smooth over the discomfort. I told myself he was making common predictions. Old pipes knock. Upstairs neighbors drag furniture. It is not exactly seeing the future. Still, I checked his profile again. No mutuals. No signs I knew him. Distance set to within 10 miles, which wasn't unusual. We chatted a little longer, and before bed he said goodnight and added, "Don't stay up too late. There's going to be another siren outside in about a minute, and I know you hate that." I frowned at that. I had told him earlier that ambulance sirens always seemed louder at night. 50 seconds later, One passed right below my window. That was the first time I felt that tiny cold pinch in my chest. Nothing dramatic, just a little internal pause, like a step missing on a staircase. The next day I told my friend Marnie about it over lunch. She snorted into her iced coffee and said, "He probably lives nearby. Or he can hear the same city sounds you can. Or he's a creep with a police scanner." I laughed, because that was the level it seemed to belong on. Dating app weirdness. A guy trying to be mysterious. We had all had stranger messages than that. That night he texted me through the app around 6:15. "Don't order from that Thai place tonight. They're closing early." I was literally standing in my kitchen with the delivery app open, about to reorder curry from the restaurant I used when I didn't feel like cooking. I wrote back, "How would you know that?" He said, "Try calling." So I did, mostly because I wanted to prove he was being weird for no reason. A recorded message picked up and said the restaurant was closed due to a plumbing issue. At that point I stopped smiling. I wish I could tell you that I unmatched him right then, or blocked him, or trusted whatever instinct was trying to wake up inside me. But the truth is, when something is just strange enough to worry you and just normal enough to explain away, most people do not run. They rationalize. They gather little pieces of comfort and build a story that lets them keep feeling safe. Mine was that Evan lived in my neighborhood. Maybe he went to that Thai place often. Maybe he knew someone there. Maybe he worked in building design or maintenance or something, and was just unusually tuned in to the sounds and rhythms of old apartments. Maybe he was awkward and thought this whole mysterious prediction thing was charming. That night I asked him directly, "Do we know each other from somewhere?" He took a minute to reply. Then, no. I would remember. I hated how much that answer worked on me. It was smooth, but not too smooth. Creepy in theory, kind of flattering in practice. We exchanged numbers the next evening. The weird predictions continued, always small enough to sound like coincidence if I repeated them out loud. "Your train is going to stop between stations for a few minutes." It did. "There's a man in a red Orioles cap about to ask if this seat is taken." A man in a red Orioles cap did exactly that on my commute home. "Don't bother going to the laundry room tonight. The dryer on the left is broken." I found a handwritten out-of-order sign taped to it. It started to shift something in me. Not just fear, but dependence. I am embarrassed to admit that now, but it is true. When someone keeps proving they know what happens next, you start paying attention. You start waiting for their messages. Not because you trust them, exactly, but because not knowing feels worse. Evan never said anything overtly threatening. He never asked for money, never demanded pictures, never love-bombed me, never tried to rush meeting in person. In fact, whenever I suggested maybe we should get coffee and make this less weird, he would dodge it in this oddly gentle way. "Soon." "Not yet. You'd be disappointed. I'm much less interesting in person." There was something careful in the way he kept me at a distance, like he wanted access to me without ever giving me real access to him. About 2 weeks in, he texted, "You should keep your blinds closed tonight." I was at my desk, working late. It was already dark outside. My living room lamp was on, and the blinds by the front window were half open because I liked seeing the rain hit the glass. I looked up from my phone to the window. For 1 second I saw only my own reflection, pale and tired, layered over the darkness outside. Then I crossed the room and yanked the blinds shut so hard one of the plastic slats popped loose. I texted back, "Why?" He took longer than usual to answer. "Because not everyone looks away." I called him. Straight away. No hesitation. It rang once, then went to voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. I sent. What the hell does that mean? No response. I checked the app again and saw his profile still there, still active, nothing obviously wrong. I remember going around my apartment turning on every light, even the bathroom light, as if brightness could protect me. I checked the peephole, checked the back windows, checked the lock twice. At around midnight, he finally texted, "You're okay. Go to sleep." That was the first night I barely slept. The next morning I did something that now seems obvious and should have happened sooner. I looked him up properly. His phone number was linked to nothing useful. No social profiles I could verify. The pictures on his dating app profile did not come up in reverse image search, which somehow made it worse because at least stolen photos would have given me an easy explanation. I searched his first name with his supposed job and city, nothing. I checked public records sites until I made myself sick with it. There were too many Evans, no way to know which, if any, was him. I brought it up to the leasing office, trying to sound casual. I asked if they had noticed anyone hanging around outside the building, maybe someone coming in behind residents. The woman at the desk gave me the kind of polite but slightly dismissive look you get when you are still on the wrong side of undeniable. "We can remind residents not to let strangers in," she said. "But unless something actually happened, there's not much we can do." Nothing actually happened. That sentence sat in my head for weeks. Evan texted me that evening like nothing had changed. "Don't use the elevator when you get home." I was still angry enough to ignore him. I had just parked after work, and I remember reading it in the driver's seat and almost throwing my phone into my purse without replying. I was tired of feeling managed by someone I had never even met. Tired of being scared by vague messages from a man with no last name. So I used the elevator. It jerked between the second and third floor and stopped. The lights stayed on, but the car shuddered once, then went still. I was trapped in there for 19 minutes. I know exactly how long because I watched the seconds change on my phone while I pressed the alarm button over and over and told myself not to panic. It was stupid to panic over 19 minutes in a stalled elevator. But in that tiny box, knowing he had warned me, it felt like being sealed inside somebody else's control. Maintenance got it moving again. The guy who pried open the door told me it had been acting up for weeks. For weeks. I went into my apartment shaking. Not because I had almost been hurt, but because he had known. He knew, and I still could not explain how. I texted him, "How did you know?" He replied instantly, "I pay attention." I called Marnie crying that night, which I hated because crying makes everything sound crazier, less credible. She came over with a bottle of wine and sat on my couch while I showed her the messages. For the first time, she stopped joking. "This is not normal," she said quietly. "I know. No, I mean really not normal. Either he is following you, or he has access to your building somehow, or someone is feeding him information. I don't even know his last name. Block him." I looked at my phone. She saw the hesitation on my face and said, "Lila, I know what you're going to say. Then why are you hesitating?" "Because I was afraid," I thought, but not of him texting me. I was afraid of him not texting me. That sounds insane, and maybe it was. But by then his messages had stopped being just creepy. They had become warnings. Useful ones. Every ugly possibility led to the same problem. If he was stalking me, then blocking him would anger him. If he was somehow protecting me from someone else, blocking him would cut me off from information. If he was orchestrating things, then blocking him might force the next move to happen without any warning at all. Sometimes fear doesn't make you run. Sometimes it makes you sit very still and try not to disturb whatever has not killed you yet. So I did not block him. I started changing my routine instead. Different coffee shop, different route to work, blinds always closed after dark, pepper spray clipped inside my bag, phone location shared with Marnie. I bought one of those cheap rubber door stoppers and shoved it under the front door every night. I even ordered a small camera for my living room that pointed at the entryway. For a few days, nothing happened. Then the messages changed. Not just predictions anymore, but details. Blue sweater today. I looked down at the blue cardigan I was wearing at my desk. Your manager's voice gets higher when she lies. That one came right before my boss told us there would not be layoffs. There were layoffs 2 weeks later. You always lock your door twice, then check the stove even when you didn't use it. I threw up after reading that. I did not reply. I just stared at the screen while my hands went numb. A minute later he sent, "You should not live alone." That was the point where ordinary fear turned into something uglier, something animal. Because it was no longer about predicting public things, trains and sirens and broken appliances. He knew private habits. Things that happened inside my apartment when nobody was supposed to be there. I called the police non-emergency line. An officer came by that afternoon, listened to me, read some of the texts, and asked if Evan had threatened me directly. No. Have you seen him outside the building? No. Do you know his real identity? No. He was not rude. That almost made it worse. He was patient, sympathetic, and clearly filing this mentally under unsettling, but not actionable. He told me to stop communicating, save the messages, report the profile on the app, and call immediately if the man showed up in person. After he left, I sat on the floor with my back against the couch and realized how alone people can sound when they say they are being watched. I reported the profile. By evening it was gone. Not unmatched gone. No trace in the app. At 9:30, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Did you really think that would help? I felt every drop of blood leave my face. I wrote, "Who are you?" No answer. Then, closed the bathroom window. I ran to the bathroom. The small frosted window above the tub was cracked open about an inch. I had opened it after showering and forgotten to shut it. I slammed it closed and locked it, though I knew how ridiculous that was because any person small enough to fit through that window was not my biggest problem. I slept at Marnie's place that night. Over the next week, the messages came from different numbers. Always brief. Never enough for a direct threat. Just the same horrible intimacy. Your neighbor in 4B leaves at 7:12 every morning. The man at the front desk doesn't check IDs. You should replace the weak screw in your bedroom window latch. He was teaching me how vulnerable I was. That was the worst part. Not just that he knew things, but that he seemed to enjoy pacing out that knowledge, showing me one exposed nerve at a time. I started wondering whether he had been inside my apartment. I checked every closet, every cabinet, every shadowy space like a person in a movie, even though I knew real life does not build tension with dramatic reveals. Real life just quietly destroys your sense of safety. The living room camera I bought showed nothing unusual. Just me coming and going, a maintenance guy one afternoon to inspect the smoke alarm, Marnie dropping off groceries when I was too scared to stop at the store. I almost convinced myself the maintenance visit explained everything. Maybe he had found some way to plant a second camera. Maybe it was not Evan at all. Maybe it was someone in the building. The maintenance guy had a company shirt, a name tag, a normal tired face. That scared me more than if he had looked creepy. Normal is hard to fight. I called the property management company and demanded they tell me which employee had been in my unit over the last month. They gave me a list. 3 names, 2 scheduled visits, 1 emergency plumber call on a Saturday when the unit below me had a ceiling leak. I barely remembered that one because I had been out and they used their key to access my bathroom while I was gone. I asked for full names. They refused. I asked if any of them had prior complaints. They said they could not discuss employees. I started looking at every man in the building differently. The maintenance guy, the tall resident with the headphones, the older man who always took too long to get his mail. Suspicion is exhausting. It turns your whole world into a lineup. Then came the text that still makes my chest tighten when I think about it. It was a Thursday. Cold, windy, clear sky, one of those nights where the city sounds sharper because the air is so dry. I had stayed late in the office because going home felt like going into a trap. Around 11, I was finally in bed with the lamp off, my phone charging on the nightstand. It buzzed once. Unknown number. Don't open your apartment door tonight. I sat up immediately. I stared at the message for maybe 2 seconds before another one came in. No matter who says your name. Then someone knocked. 3 clean, firm knocks. Not pounding. Not the random confused tap of someone at the wrong door. Intentional. Controlled. Like whoever was outside knew exactly where they were supposed to be. I froze. It is strange what your mind does in moments like that. It doesn't race in a dramatic way. Mine got very simple. Heart. Door. Phone. Breathing. Then I heard a man's voice through the wood. Lila? Building maintenance. I did not move. He spoke again, a little louder. We got a report of a water leak from the unit below you. I kept staring at the door. The rubber stopper was already wedged under it. Every light in the apartment was off. The only glow came from the street lamp filtering thinly around the edges of my blackout curtains. My phone buzzed again in my hand. That is not maintenance. The knocking came a second time, harder now. Ma'am, I need you to open the door. I backed away from the entry and moved silently into the hallway between my bedroom and the living room. My legs felt weak enough to fold. Then the man outside said in a completely different tone, Lila, I know you're in there. No professional voice. No script. Just flat, irritated certainty. I called 911. I whispered my address, so quietly the operator asked me twice to repeat it. While I was speaking, I heard the doorknob turn. Slowly at first, testing, then harder. Metal against metal. A deliberate rattle. I remember the sound of my own pulse in my ears. The operator told me officers were on the way and asked if I could lock myself somewhere secure. I went into my bedroom and pushed my dresser against the door with shaking hands, though I knew that if someone really wanted in, a cheap dresser would not do much. Then I heard something that still bothers me more than the knocking. Silence. The doorknob stopped. The hallway outside went quiet. He had either left or he was standing there listening. I stayed crouched on the bedroom floor, clutching the phone, waiting for some crash that never came. After what felt like forever, maybe 3 minutes, I heard distant voices in the building hallway. Men's voices. Story number 2. Do you know how sometimes a person can sit across from you for an hour, maybe two, smile at the right moments, ask normal questions, stir a drink with one finger, and still make you feel like you've stepped into the wrong life by accident? That's what this was like. I wish I could tell you it started with something dramatic, some obvious red flag that would make sense in hindsight. A scream outside, a warning from a stranger, a photo that moved on its own. Something clean and cinematic. It wasn't like that. It started with a dating app, an ordinary Tuesday night, and a girl whose profile said she'd been online 2 minutes ago. My name's Daniel. I was 28 when this happened, and I was living in a one-bedroom apartment outside Richmond, Virginia, in a stretch of road lined with chain restaurants, gas stations, and apartment buildings that all looked like they'd been assembled from the same beige plastic set. I worked in inventory management for a medical supply company, which sounds more important than it was. Mostly it meant spreadsheets, warehouse counts, emails nobody answered on time, and the kind of routine that makes the days smear together. At that point in my life, boring had started to feel like a personality. I'd been single for almost a year after a relationship that ended without any big fight, just the quiet exhaustion of two people who stopped recognizing each other. I wasn't devastated exactly. I was just drifting. Work, gym, microwave dinner, some show I only half-watched, bed. On weekends I'd drive to my sister's place sometimes, or get a beer with a friend from college if schedules lined up. Most of the time they didn't. So eventually I did what a lot of lonely people do when they've convinced themselves they're not lonely. I downloaded an app, then another one, then deleted one, kept one, re-downloaded the first one. It became background noise, something I checked while waiting in line for coffee or pretending to care about laundry. Most matches went nowhere. A few turned into short conversations that died the second one of us got distracted. One girl invited me to her wellness investment opportunity, which turned out to be a pyramid scheme with candles. One unmatched me in the middle of me typing. Another sent 3 messages about astrology and asked for my birth time before learning my last name. Then I matched with a woman named Lily Mercer. That profile, even now, is burned into my memory in this stupidly specific way. She had 4 pictures. Not 10, not 12, just 4. In the first one she was standing outside what looked like a bookstore, wearing a dark green coat, one hand tucked into the sleeve like she'd been caught mid-movement. In the second she was sitting at a diner booth, looking away from the camera. In the third she was on a beach at dusk, hair blown across half her face. The last one was just her smiling, no teeth, in the front seat of a car. She was beautiful, but not in that polished, overly curated way where every photo looks like it belongs to a different influencer. She looked real. A little tired maybe, like someone who forgot the camera was there. Her bio was short. Not great at talking about myself. Coffee is better than bars. Looking for something honest. That was it. No Instagram handle. No jokes about tacos or murder documentaries. No list of demands. Just that. We matched around 9 at night. She messaged first. "Hey Daniel, you seem normal." I laughed when I read that. It felt weirdly refreshing. I wrote back, "That depends who you ask." She replied almost immediately, "I'm asking you." That was the first thing that stood out. Not just how fast she replied, but how focused she seemed. Most app conversations wander around for a while. Hers didn't. She asked what I did, whether I liked living in Richmond, whether I lived alone. That last question made me pause for maybe half a second, but she followed it with, "Sorry, that sounded invasive. I just mean, are you a roommate person?" I told her I lived alone. She said, "That's probably better." I remember thinking that was an odd answer, but I let it go. We messaged for maybe an hour. She was funny in a dry, almost accidental way. She said she worked in admin stuff, which was vague, but I wasn't exactly conducting background checks on women from dating apps. She said she'd moved around a lot and didn't love talking online. She asked if I wanted to meet for coffee the next evening. That part surprised me. Usually it took days to get to that point, but I said yes. She suggested a place called Halpern's, an older coffee shop downtown that stayed open late and still had mismatched chairs and framed local art on the walls. I knew it. It was about 20 minutes from me, closer to the older part of the city, near a row of antique stores and a small theater. We agreed on 7:30. At around 6 the next evening, she sent me, "Please don't think I'm weird, but if I'm late, wait inside. Don't stand outside." I stared at that for a second. I wrote back, "Everything okay?" After about a minute, she said, "Yeah, I just hate parking around there." It was plausible enough that I didn't push. That day had been cold and gray, one of those late fall evenings where the sky starts dimming before you're ready for it, and everything looks flatter than usual. I drove downtown with the heat on too high and the radio low. Traffic was light. The city had that weekday hush to it, not empty, just tired. People heading home, restaurant windows beginning to glow, the sidewalks damp from a little rain earlier. I got there 10 minutes early and went inside like she'd asked. Halperins smelled like espresso, old wood, and wet coats. There were maybe 8 people in the whole place. A couple sharing a muffin near the window, 2 students with laptops open, an older man reading a newspaper that looked like it had survived several presidents. Jazz was playing quietly over the speakers. I picked a table near the back where I could see both the door and the counter. At 7:34, she walked in. And for a second, I had that weird feeling you get when someone from the internet turns into a real person in front of you and your brain takes a beat to catch up. It was definitely her. Same face, same dark hair, same small, self-contained expression. But she looked thinner than her pictures. More fragile somehow. She wore a black sweater under a tan coat, and she kept one hand wrapped around the strap of her bag like she was holding on to something. When she saw me, she smiled right away, like she was relieved. "Daniel?" "Yeah," I said, standing. "Lily?" She nodded. Up close, the first thing I noticed was that she looked tired. Not casual, long day at work tired. More like she hadn't really slept in a while. There were faint shadows under her eyes, and every few seconds her gaze flicked toward the front window. We hugged, that awkward quick first date hug where neither person commits to it, then sat down. I asked if she wanted coffee. She said tea. Chamomile if they had it. When I came back with the drinks, she thanked me like I'd done something unusually kind. Then she wrapped both hands around the cup and sat there for a second without drinking. "You okay?" I asked. She looked up fast, almost like I'd caught her doing something. "Yeah," she said. "Sorry. I almost didn't come." I laughed a little. That's usually my line. That got a real smile out of her. For the first 20 minutes or so, it felt almost normal. Better than normal, honestly. Conversation came easy. We talked about bad jobs, favorite movies, terrible landlords. She said she used to work at a veterinary clinic, then quickly corrected herself and said, "Not work, volunteer there for a while." I noticed things like that. Tiny corrections. Tiny hesitations. When I asked where she'd grown up, she said, "Around here." "What part?" She looked down into her tea. "Honestly, I'd rather not say. I know that sounds rude." "It's okay. It's not about you," she said. "I just don't really like giving out too much too fast." There was something in the way she said it that kept me from taking offense. It didn't feel like disinterest. It felt like caution that had hardened into reflex. A little later, her phone lit up on the table. She looked at the screen, and all the color seemed to leave her face. She flipped it over without answering. "Bad timing?" I asked. She shook her head. "Wrong person." The weird part was that after that, she started asking me questions that felt oddly specific. Did anyone know I was meeting her? Did I usually tell friends when I went on app dates? Had I posted anything online recently that tagged my location? I joked, "Should I be worried?" She didn't smile. "No," she said quietly. "I just think people share too much." I remember this very clearly because it was the first moment I considered leaving. Not because I thought she was dangerous, more because the whole thing had started to feel off balance. Like I was sitting in the middle of a conversation whose beginning had happened somewhere else. But then she seemed to catch herself. She asked about my sister. She told me she liked old houses and hated driving in the rain. She laughed when I told her about the candle pyramid scheme girl. For a while, I relaxed again. At around 8:40, she excused herself to the bathroom. She was gone longer than felt normal, maybe 7 or 8 minutes. Long enough that I checked my phone, looked toward the hallway, then told myself not to be weird about it. When she came back, she sat down quickly and said, "Can we leave?" The question hit me strangely because she looked embarrassed and scared at the same time. "Yeah," I said. "Sure. You all right?" She gave a small nod, but she was already reaching for her bag. We walked outside into air that felt colder than before. The street was mostly quiet. Headlights passed at the intersection. Somewhere farther down the block, I could hear people laughing outside a restaurant. Then she stopped walking. There was a dark SUV parked across the street. Nothing remarkable about it, except that she was staring at it like it mattered. "Is that your car?" I asked. "No. Do you need me to wait with you?" She looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time all night. "Daniel," she said, "has anyone ever taken pictures of you without you knowing?" I actually laughed because I thought she was joking. She didn't laugh back. I felt my stomach tighten. "What?" She glanced behind me, then stepped closer, lowering her voice. "If someone contacts you about me, don't answer right away." "Who would contact me?" "I don't know," she said. "Maybe nobody. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have come." Before I could say anything else, she touched my arm, just briefly. Her hand was ice cold. Then she said, "You were kind. I mean that." And she walked away. Not to a parked car. Not to a rideshare. She crossed the street at the corner and disappeared down a side block without looking back. I stood there for maybe 10 seconds, trying to decide if I'd just been politely dumped in the strangest way possible. Then I drove home. I wish I could tell you I handled it like a rational adult. I didn't. I spent half the drive replaying every weird thing she'd said. By the time I got back to my apartment, I'd mostly landed on the simplest explanation, that she had an ex, or anxiety, or both, and whatever was going on had nothing to do with me. My building was quiet. The hallway smelled like old carpet and somebody's burnt dinner. I took a shower, watched half an episode of something, and checked the app before bed. Our message thread was gone. At first I thought the app was glitching. I refreshed it twice. Closed it, reopened it. Nothing. Her profile had disappeared too. Not unmatched. Gone. That should have been the end of it. People delete apps all the time. People panic after dates. People change their minds. If that had been all it was, I probably wouldn't even remember her name now. But the next morning, I woke up to a text from an unknown number. It said, "Did you enjoy your date with Lily?" That was all. No punctuation beyond the question mark. No name. No explanation. I stared at it in bed, my room still dim with early light coming through the blinds. For a second I thought maybe it was one of my friends messing with me, but nobody knew her name. I hadn't told anyone. I hadn't even told anyone I was meeting someone that night. I wrote back, "Who is this?" Nothing. I called the number. It went straight to voicemail, but the voicemail box wasn't set up. I told myself it had to be her. Maybe she'd gotten embarrassed and was trying to be mysterious. Maybe she'd given my number to a friend for safety, and that friend was checking up in a really weird way. But that didn't explain how she got my number in the first place. The app didn't show it. At work, I couldn't focus. Around lunch, more out of curiosity than panic, I searched her name. Lily Mercer. What came up wasn't her profile. It wasn't social media. It was a missing person case. I still remember the exact feeling of that moment, because my brain refused to accept what my eyes were reading. It was like seeing your own address on a stranger's mail. Something familiar in the wrong place. The article was from a local news site, 3 years old. The headline read, "Family still seeking answers in disappearance of Richmond woman." There was her face. Not just similar. Not close enough to be creepy. Her. The same dark hair, same eyes, same mouth that always looked like it was holding something back. The article said she was 24 when she disappeared. Last seen leaving work on a Thursday evening. Her car was found 2 days later in a grocery store parking lot a county away. No sign of her after that. Police suspected foul play, but had no arrests. Her family maintained a Facebook page asking for tips. I read the article 3 times. Then I opened the family page. More pictures. Graduation photos, birthday photos, a photo of her holding a dog. In every one of them, it was the woman I'd had tea with less than 24 hours earlier. I felt cold all over. There's a part of me that still gets embarrassed telling this next part, because I know how it sounds. I didn't immediately call the police. I didn't march into a station with screenshots and demand answers. I sat there in my car in the work parking lot and tried, very hard, to find a normal explanation. A sister, a cousin, somebody using her photos, some sick catfish thing. That's where I landed eventually, and once I had that explanation, I grabbed onto it because the alternatives felt insane. I went back to her missing person page and looked through comments until I found a post from about 6 months after she disappeared. Someone had written, "I saw a profile using Lily's photos on another app. This is disgusting." The family had replied asking for screenshots, but the link was dead. That changed everything, because now it wasn't impossible. It was just terrible. Someone had been using her identity. That evening, when I got home, I found an envelope on the floor just inside my apartment door. No stamp, no address. It had been slipped under the door. My name, Daniel, was written on the front in neat block letters. The paper inside held a single printed photograph. It was me leaving Halpern's the night before, taken from across the street. My face was turned slightly toward the camera, keys in my hand, jacket open. In the corner of the frame, just barely visible, was the dark SUV. On the back of the photo, someone had written, "You should let this go." I dropped it, literally dropped it onto my kitchen floor, and backed away from it like it might do something. That was when fear stopped being abstract. I called the non-emergency police line first, because I still felt stupid saying it out loud. I explained about the date, the missing woman, the text, the photo. They told me an officer could come take a report. 2 officers showed up about 40 minutes later. Both polite, both tired in that specific way cops often look when they've already had a full day before you even open the door. One of them, Officer Mendez, did most of the talking. He asked to see the envelope, the photo, the article, the text. I showed him everything. He studied the missing person page for a while. "That's definitely her?" he asked. "It's definitely the woman I met." He nodded slowly. "Could be somebody using old photos. Could be somebody who looks similar." "No," I said. "It was her." He gave me the kind of look adults give kids when kids say something impossible. "I understand this is unsettling," he said, "but people are very good at seeing patterns when they're scared." I hated him a little for that. He took the photo, had me email screenshots of the article and the text, and asked whether I'd seen anyone suspicious around the building. I told him about the SUV. He asked for a plate number. I didn't have one. Before leaving, he told me to keep my doors locked, document any more contact, and call 911 if someone tried to enter. Which, to be fair, was reasonable advice. It just felt insultingly small compared to how wrong everything felt. After they left, I called my sister, Jenna. I almost never call Jenna late unless something's actually wrong, so the second she answered and heard my voice, she said, "What happened?" Jenna was 32, practical to the point of cruelty sometimes, a nurse, divorced, impossible to rattle. I told her everything. When I finished, there was a long silence. Then she said, "I want you to come stay here tonight." "I'm fine." "You are absolutely not fine. It's probably some psycho catfish thing." "Then let the psycho catfish wonder where you are." I should have listened. I didn't. Partly because I felt stupid. Partly because leaving my apartment felt like admitting this was bigger than I could explain. "I locked everything," I told her. "I'll be all right." She sighed that exhausted older sister sigh. "Then keep your phone on." "And Daniel?" "Yeah. If you get one more message, one more weird thing, you stop trying to explain it away." I said I would. I don't think I meant it. The next 2 days were quiet. Quiet in the worst way. No more texts. No cars outside that I noticed. No envelopes. Work felt impossible, but normality has a way of forcing itself forward. Inventory reports still needed doing. My manager still wanted updates. The vending machine still ate my dollar. I started to convince myself the photo had been a one-off scare tactic by whoever was using her identity. Maybe they picked random men from apps and panicked when one of them got curious. Then on Friday night, I got home around 8 and found my apartment door unlocked. I know for a fact I locked it that morning. I checked because I'd become obsessive about checking. Once, twice, then jiggling the knob just to be sure. When I touched it that night and it swung inward, my whole body went rigid. The apartment was dark except for the glow of the microwave clock. Nothing looked out of place from the doorway. Couch where it should be, shoes by the mat, kitchen counter cluttered in my usual depressing bachelor arrangement. I stepped inside slowly and said, "Hello." Nothing. I should have left right then. Called 911 from the hallway. I know that now. Instead, I did the stupid human thing. The thing people do in horror stories that feels ridiculous until you realize most of us are wired to seek confirmation before we accept danger. I checked. Bedroom empty. Bathroom empty. Closet empty. Then I got to the living room and noticed a glass of water on my coffee table. I hadn't left a glass there. It was half. Story number 3. Have you ever driven someone somewhere, watched them walk away, and still felt like they never really left? That is the easiest way I can explain what happened to me. My name is Daniel. I was 29 when this happened, and I was living in Raleigh, North Carolina, in a one-bedroom apartment above a nail salon and a tax office that always seemed to be closed. At the time, I was driving for a rideshare app at night because my daytime job at a warehouse had cut hours. I packed online orders from 8 in the morning until 2 or 3 in the afternoon, went home, slept a little, microwaved something unhealthy, then got back in my car and drove strangers around until 1 or 2 at night. It was not a glamorous life, but it was simple, mostly quiet. I liked it that way. Night driving suited me. The city felt softer after dark, less demanding. Street lights reflected off wet roads. Porch lights glowed in neighborhoods where everyone was already asleep, and the voices in my car came in pieces. A couple arguing after a bar. A nurse heading in for an overnight shift. A college kid talking too loudly about crypto. A man in a suit sitting in complete silence for 20 minutes and tipping me $12. People got in, people got out. Their lives brushed mine for a little while, then disappeared. That distance made me feel safe. You convince yourself, doing a job like that you are only passing through other people's problems. You are the driver. You are not part of the story. I do not think that anymore. It started on a Thursday in late October. I remember that because the weather had turned cold fast. The kind of cold that sneaks in after sunset and sits in your sleeves. It had rained on and off all evening, and by around 11:30 the roads were slick and shining. I had the heat on low, some local station playing old pop songs, and I was thinking about calling it a night after one more ride. The request came from outside a coffee shop near NC State. Pickup name was Lila. When I pulled up, I saw her standing alone under the awning. Early 20s maybe. Dark hair pulled back, oversized beige sweater, black jeans, white sneakers. She kept checking her phone, then looking over her shoulder toward the street like she expected someone to appear there. Not drunk, not high, just nervous. She got in the back seat and gave me this tight little smile people use when they are trying to seem normal. "Hey," she said. "Hey," I said. "Lila?" "Yeah." She shut the door, buckled up right away, and held her phone in both hands. Her nails were bitten down so far they looked painful. The destination was a residential address about 20 minutes away in an older neighborhood north of downtown. Not a bad area, not great either. Mostly small brick houses, big trees, some rentals mixed in with family homes. As I pulled away, I asked the same thing I asked everybody. "How's your night going?" She let out a breath that sounded like she had been holding it for an hour. "Honestly, I'm kind of freaking out." I laughed a little, just trying to be friendly. "Bad date?" "Technically no date yet. That's the problem." I glanced at her in the mirror. She was staring down at her phone screen. It's my first dating app meetup, she said. Ever, which is already embarrassing to admit to a stranger. It's not embarrassing. It is when you're 23. You'd be surprised. That made her smile for real, just a little. She said his name was Aaron. They had been messaging for almost 2 weeks. He was funny, normal, had a dog in his pictures, and apparently worked in software. They were meeting at his place first because he said it was raining too hard to walk to the bar they planned to go to. She knew that sounded stupid. Her roommate had told her not to do it. She had shared her location with 2 friends. She had even sent one of them his profile screenshots. As she talked, she kept opening the app, reading something, closing it again. You don't have to do it, I said. She looked up. What? If you're this uncomfortable, you can bail. So you got sick. Family emergency. Flat tire. Whatever. She laughed once, but there was no humor in it. You sound exactly like my friend Maya. Smart friend. Maybe. She looked out the window. I'm trying not to be paranoid. That sentence stuck with me because of how quietly she said it. Like she was trying to convince herself more than me. We hit a red light, and I saw her expression in the mirror. Not excitement. Not that anxious first date energy where somebody is fixing their hair and rehearsing a smile. She looked like she was going to a job interview. She already knew she would fail. You want me to wait a minute when we get there? I asked. Her eyes flicked up. Can drivers do that? I mean, officially probably not, but I can circle the block. Make sure you get inside okay. For the first time, she seemed relieved. Would you? Yeah. Thank you. The rest of the ride was quiet. The rain had eased into mist, and neighborhoods slid past in little gold pools of porch light. Wreaths were starting to appear on doors. I remember seeing a plastic skeleton still hanging from a mailbox, one arm twisted backward in a way that looked almost human. Small things like that stay with you for weird reasons. When we turned onto her destination street, she leaned forward slightly. That's it, she said. The house was a narrow 2-story place with gray siding and a small front porch. Only one light was on upstairs. The rest of the house looked dark. No car in the driveway. She noticed that too. That's weird, she said. Maybe he parks in the back? Maybe. I stopped at the curb. She did not move right away. She was staring at the house, then at her phone. He texted that he was here, she said. You want to call him? She shook her head. No, that's somehow worse. A few seconds passed. Then she opened the door, stepped out, and leaned back in. Could you maybe wait like 2 minutes? Yeah, I said. Go ahead. She thanked me again and started up the walkway, hugging her sweater around herself. I watched in the mirror as she reached the porch, hesitated, then knocked. No answer. She looked at her phone. Knocked again. After maybe 15 seconds, the front door opened just enough for someone inside to pull it inward. I did not get a good look at the person. Just a shape, a man maybe taller than her, standing back from the doorway in darkness. She said something I could not hear. Then she stepped inside. The door shut. I waited. After about 3 minutes, I pulled forward, turned around at the corner, and came back once. House still dark except for the upstairs light. Nothing unusual. No shouting, no running, no sign anything was wrong. I told myself that was that. It should have been. Around 1 in the morning, I stopped for gas and a stale hot dog I did not really want. While I was standing by my car looking at my phone, I saw a local news alert pop up. Police warn public about assault suspect using fake dating app profiles. I opened it immediately. The warning said police were investigating multiple reports involving a man who used fake identities on dating apps to lure women to private residences in the Raleigh area. There were not many details yet. They had not released a suspect photo. They were advising anyone meeting someone from an app for the first time to do so in a public place and to notify friends or family. You get those alerts all the time. Half the time they barely connect to anything in your life. But my stomach dropped so hard it felt like missing a stair. I read the alert 3 times. I went back and looked at my ride history. The address, the pickup name, timestamp. I told myself I was overreacting. There was no reason to connect the two. Dating app danger in a city that size was not exactly unheard of. Still, I sat in my car for another minute with the engine running, trying to decide whether to do something. Finally, I used the app's lost item contact option, the only way I could think of to reach her without breaking some rule. I sent a message that probably sounded ridiculous. "Hey, this is your driver from earlier. Sorry to bother you. I just saw a police warning about fake dating profiles. Just wanted to make sure you're okay." No response. I drove home around 1:30, showered, and got into bed, but I could not sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured her standing on that porch looking at a dark house, trying to talk herself into being brave. By morning I felt stupid, paranoid. She probably had a perfectly awkward, perfectly normal bad date and ignored my message because it was weird. Then that afternoon, while I was on break at the warehouse, I saw the full story. Same warning, updated. This time there were details. One woman had reported being drugged after meeting a man through an app. Another said the profile pictures did not match the man who opened the door. A third had escaped before going inside and later realized the address she had been given belonged to a vacant rental property. Police believed the suspect was using multiple fake names and maybe multiple addresses. They still did not say anyone was dead, but I remember the exact feeling I had reading it. Not panic. Something colder than panic. Recognition. That address. The one from the night before. It was in the police article, listed among locations people were asked to avoid while the investigation continued. I almost dropped my phone. After work, I called the non-emergency line and explained everything. I gave them the address, the time, her first name from the app, what she had told me in the car, what I had seen. The dispatcher thanked me and said an officer might contact me if needed. That was it. No drama. No sirens. No immediate answers. Just that awful, ordinary feeling of doing the right thing and still feeling completely useless. That night I almost did not drive. But rent was rent, and after spending most of the day wound tight and sick to my stomach, I told myself sitting at home would only make it worse. So I got in my car around 8 and went online. For the first few hours, nothing unusual happened. Airport run. Grocery pickup. A drunk guy who sang softly to himself the whole trip. The world, annoyingly, kept being normal. Around 11:20, I got a request near the same coffee shop. Pickup name was Lila. I actually felt my fingers go numb on the steering wheel. I pulled over and stared at the screen like maybe I was reading it wrong. Same spelling. Same location type, just half a block over. Destination not shown yet because it was one of those app settings riders could hide until pickup. I should have canceled. I know that now. I knew it then too. Instead I accepted. The streets were damp again, though it had not rained. Cold enough for people's breath to fog in the air. When I turned onto the pickup street, she was there, standing under the glow of a pharmacy sign this time, but otherwise exactly the same. Same beige sweater, same black jeans, same white sneakers, same phone clutched in both hands. For one second I had this stupid thought that maybe she just owned two similar outfits. That is how the mind works when something is wrong. It reaches for any normal explanation before it lets you believe what you are seeing. She opened the back door and got in. "Hey," she said. Same tone as the night before. I looked at her in the mirror. "Lila?" "Yeah. Did I drive you yesterday?" She frowned a little, as if I had asked whether she liked olives. "No." My mouth went dry. "You look really familiar." "I get that a lot," she said, but it sounded automatic, like she barely heard me. Then she gave the same tight, nervous smile. "I'm kind of freaking out, honestly." Every hair on my arm stood up. It was the same sentence, word for word. I felt my foot move from the brake to the gas almost by instinct, because a car behind me honked. I pulled away from the curb, heart beating so hard it made my throat ache. "I'm sorry," I said. "What did you say?" She looked up from her phone. "It's my first dating app meetup." I nearly missed the next turn. I did not know how to explain the feeling of hearing somebody repeat themselves exactly, not like they remember saying it, but like they are on a track and cannot step off it. There was nothing theatrical about it, nothing ghostly. That made it worse. She was real. Her voice shook in the same places. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear the same way. She bit the inside of her cheek before speaking. "His name is Aaron," she said. "We've been messaging like 2 weeks." I interrupted her. "Listen to me. You cannot go to this address." She went silent. The app finally revealed the destination. Same house, same street, same gray siding in my mind before we were even there. "What?" she said. "I took you there last night." "No, you didn't." "Yes, I did. I waited outside while you went in." Her face changed then. Not because she believed me, but because she thought I was insane. "That's not funny." "I'm not kidding. There was a police warning this morning. The profile is fake. You can't go. Stop the car. Not until you listen. Stop the car right now." Her voice got sharp. Real fear. I pulled over beside a closed laundromat, both of us breathing hard. She had already taken out her phone. "I'm reporting you," she said. "What the hell is wrong with you?" "Please," I said. "Just check the news. Search fake dating profiles Raleigh." She stared at me for a long second, then at her screen. I watched her face while she read. The color drained out of it so fast I thought she might faint. "That address," I said. "It's the same one, right?" She swallowed. "How do you know that?" "Because I drove you there yesterday." "No," she whispered. "No, I did not go anywhere yesterday." I turned around in my seat a little, enough to show her I was not playing around. "Then why are you wearing the same clothes?" She looked down at herself like she was seeing them for the first time. "It's laundry day," she said weakly. Then, after a beat, "That doesn't mean anything." Maybe it did not. Maybe that part never meant anything. But in the moment it felt like the whole world narrowing to a point. "Call your roommate," I said. "Call anyone. Tell them where you are." Instead she opened the profile and held it up as if the glowing screen itself might argue with me. "This is him," she said. "These are his messages. He sent me a selfie 10 minutes ago." I took one look and felt sick. Not because of the guy. Because I had seen the picture already. Not clearly, not enough to identify him, but enough to know. It was taken inside that house. Same dim upstairs room. Same slanted ceiling. Same warm yellow lamp in the corner reflected in the window behind him. I had seen that light the night before. "I know that room," I said. She pulled the phone back. "How?" Before I could answer, her phone buzzed. A new message. "Here yet?" Then another, almost immediately. "I can see your car." We both froze. I looked out the windows. Closed laundromat. Empty sidewalk. Dark parking lot across the street. No one obvious. Her face had gone gray. Then a third message appeared. "Why did you stop?" She made this tiny sound in the back of her throat, barely even a gasp. I did not think. I just put the car in drive and pulled out so fast the tires chirped. "Are you sure you shared your location with friends?" I asked. "Yes." "Turn it off." She did. Her hands were shaking too badly to do it the first time. I kept checking every mirror. A black SUV turned onto the road behind us, and I felt a burst of panic so intense I almost ran a red light, but it turned off 2 blocks later. "What do we do?" she whispered. "We go to a police station." She nodded fast. Then her phone rang. No number, just unknown caller. She rejected it. It rang again. Rejected again. Then a text came through. That was a mistake. I drove straight to the nearest station and did not stop once. She was crying quietly in the back seat by then. Not dramatic, just terrified in that helpless way that is somehow harder to witness. Like her body had figured out the danger before her mind could. At the station, I went in with her. I did not want to, because I suddenly felt very aware of how insane my story sounded, but I was not about to leave her alone. A desk officer took us seriously once he saw the messages and the news alert connection. We ended up in a back room with fluorescent lights and stale coffee smell, giving statements separately. They asked me if I knew her before the first ride. No. Had I ever been to the house myself? No. Did I remember anything about the man at the door? Barely. Height maybe over 6 feet. Male build. Dark clothes. That was it. By the time we were done, it was after 1. An officer drove out to the address while another stayed with us. They found the house empty. No furniture downstairs. Dust. Back door unlocked. Upstairs, one room had signs of recent use. Air mattress. Folding chair. Fast food wrappers. A ring light. Some camera equipment. But no person. No Aaron, if that was even a real name. No phone. No laptop. Nothing that led anywhere useful. They told Lila she needed to stay somewhere else for a few days. Not her apartment. Not anywhere listed on her socials. Her roommate came and picked her up, white as a sheet and furious in the way scared people get furious. Before she left, Lila turned to me and said thank you about 6 times. Then she hugged herself and walked out with her roommate and never looked back. I assumed that would be the end of my part in it. I was wrong. 2 days later, a detective called and asked me to come in. They had reviewed traffic cameras from the area near the laundromat. My car was visible. So was another one, a dark sedan that had slowed near us, then continued past after I drove away. It was registered to a fake name through a shell company. The detective showed me stills from a gas station camera taken earlier that evening. The sedan had parked across from the coffee shop where Lila requested the ride. A man got out for less than a minute, too brief and too hooded to identify well, then got back in and waited, watching. Not just for her, the detective thought, for whoever brought her. I remember just staring at him. What do you mean? He folded his hands on the desk. We think he may have been using rideshare pickups as a layer of safety. Victims arrive in someone else's vehicle. That makes them look expected. It also gives him a witness, which sounds risky, but maybe in his mind it made the whole thing seem more legitimate. Then why message that he could see my car? We don't know, but I knew. Or at least I felt I knew. Because I had interfered. Because whatever plan he had, I had taken something from him. The detective must have seen that thought land on my face, because he said, "We don't believe you were specifically targeted." Believe is not the word you want to hear in a room like that. That night I did not drive. Or the night after. I started checking my apartment parking lot from the upstairs landing before going down. I kept my curtains closed even during the day. Every unfamiliar car slowed near me too long. Every passenger who sat silently in the back seat felt wrong. I told myself I was being dramatic, but fear changes your scale for things. A sound that once meant nothing starts feeling like evidence. About a week later, I went back online because I needed money. Bills do not care whether you are afraid. Story number 4. Do you know that feeling when your phone lights up in your hand, and for half a second you already know, before you even read it, that whatever is on the screen is going to divide your life into before and after? That happened to me on a Thursday night in October, sitting across from a man I had been talking to for almost 3 weeks. My phone buzzed beside my water glass, face up on the table. I glanced down without thinking, expecting a message from my friend Nina asking if I was still alive or if my date was boring. Instead, the notification said, "Safety alert. Your match has failed identity verification. If you feel unsafe, leave immediately and contact local authorities." I read it twice because my brain refused to make sense of it the first time. Then I looked up. The man across from me was already watching my face. And then he smiled. Not in a confused way, not like he was about to say, "That must be some glitch." Not embarrassed, not surprised. Just a slow, calm smile, like he had been waiting for that exact moment all evening. My name is Mara. I was 28 when this happened, and I was living alone in Columbus, Ohio, in a 3rd-floor apartment over a dry cleaner and a nail salon. I worked for a regional insurance company doing fraud review, which is a lot less interesting than it sounds. Mostly it meant long hours at a desk, staring at forms and receipts and trying to decide whether someone was lying about a dented bumper or a stolen laptop. My life was ordinary in a way I used to find depressing. After this, I started to think ordinary is one of the best things a life can be. Back then I had one close friend in the city, Nina, and a younger brother in Cincinnati, who forgot to call me back most of the time. My mother lived in Arizona with her second husband. I had been single for almost a year after ending a relationship that was not dramatic enough to make a good story, just disappointing in the slow, exhausting way some relationships are. Nothing terrible had happened to me. I wasn't reckless. I wasn't naive. I locked my doors, shared my location, kept pepper spray in my bag, and had the usual careful habits women build without even noticing. That was probably why the app worked on me. It was called Tandem, one of those dating apps that starts by pretending it is different from all the others. That fall, they launched a new feature called 100% verified identity. There were ads for it everywhere: bus stops, podcasts, YouTube, even in the elevators at work. A little blue shield next to smiling people with lines like "no catfish, no fake names, no guesswork." They made a big deal about government ID checks, facial matching, real-time liveness scanning, whatever that means. They use the kind of language companies use when they want you to feel protected without ever promising anything specific. I remember the exact night I downloaded it. It was raining, steady and fine, and the windows in my apartment had that cold fog around the edges. I was eating leftover soup on the couch, watching some dumb home renovation show I wasn't paying attention to. Nina had been on me for months to get back out there, and when I texted her a screenshot of the app, she sent back, "Finally. Also only talk to men with the shield thing." I'm serious. So I did. Most of the profiles were what you'd expect. Bathroom selfies, fish photos, guys who described themselves as sarcastic and competitive, like that was supposed to be attractive. Then I matched with Daniel. That wasn't the real Daniel, obviously. I found that out later. But that was the name on the profile. Daniel Mercer, 32, physical therapist, lived in German Village, liked old movies and cooking and trail running. His photos were normal, which honestly helped. One outside in a coat with coffee in his hand, one at what looked like a family barbecue, one slightly awkward mirror selfie in a nice shirt. Nothing too polished. Nothing that screamed fake. And then there was the shield, that blue little badge right under his name. His first message was simple: "You look like someone who always knows the best place to order coffee." That made me laugh because my profile mentioned as a joke that I took coffee too seriously. We started talking that night and kept talking every day after that. He was good at it. That is the first thing I need to say. People always imagine dangerous men as obvious, oily, creepy right away. Sometimes they are. But sometimes they know exactly how to build trust, because trust is the whole point. Daniel was patient. He didn't overdo compliments. He asked questions and remembered answers. He had a dry sense of humor that felt easy, not forced. When I mentioned I worked in fraud review, he said, "So if I ever fake my death for insurance money, you'll be the one who catches me." And I sent back, "Depends how convincing the paperwork is." It felt light, safe. The kind of nothing conversation that slowly stops feeling like nothing. There were a few odd things early on, but each one was small enough to explain away. The first was that he avoided live video calls. Not aggressively, just smoothly. Once he said he was heading into the gym. Another time he was cooking and his hands were a mess. Another time he had a migraine and didn't want to look like a swamp creature. We sent voice notes instead, and I remember thinking his voice matched the profile somehow. Warm, easy, a little rough at the edges. The kind of voice that made everything sound more sincere. When we finally did a video call, it was late and short, maybe 4 minutes. He was sitting in a parked car. The light was dim and came from below, probably the dashboard, which should have made him look weird, but somehow didn't. I remember a slight lag when he smiled, not enough to be sure of anything, just enough that I thought my internet was acting up. He apologized and said his signal was terrible underground. The second odd thing was that he sometimes knew small things I had not told him. Nothing huge. Once I texted him from a coffee shop on my lunch break that had a yellow tile wall, and he replied, "Corner table by the window?" I stared at the message for a second because yes, that was where I was sitting. But then I noticed I had sent him a photo of my cup, and the yellow tile wall was behind it, and maybe he recognized the place. Columbus is not that big. Another time he said, "You strike me as the type who takes the stairs even when there's an elevator." and I laughed because it was true. But maybe that was just a guess. A stranger can be alarming. A stranger who seems to understand you can be worse, because you start participating in your own manipulation. You fill in the blanks for them. By the second week, Nina wanted his full name, phone number, job, neighborhood, favorite kidney, blood type, everything. I sent her screenshots and told her to relax. He's verified, I said, actually hearing the reassurance in my own voice. She called me that night. Mara, she said, a badge on an app is not the same thing as God personally vouching for a man. I know. No, you don't. That's why you said it like that. I laughed, but not because it was funny. Because a part of me already knew she was right and didn't want to sit with it. Still, when Daniel suggested we meet, I took every precaution. Public restaurant, early evening, downtown. I drove myself. I shared my location with Nina. I even texted my brother his profile out of pure paranoia, though he only reacted with LOL okay. The restaurant was an Italian place on High Street. Nice but not fancy, low warm lights, brick walls, little votive candles on the tables. It had rained earlier, and the sidewalks were still damp, reflecting headlights in stretched gold lines. I got there first and sat where I could see the front door. When he walked in, I knew immediately that he looked like his pictures. And also not quite like his pictures. I've tried to explain that a dozen times, and it always sounds thin. His face was the same face. Same dark hair, same straight nose, same dimple on one side when he smiled. But in person there was something held back. Like the photos had been taken by a person who knew how to imitate being relaxed, while the man who entered the restaurant had to remember, in real time, what relaxed was supposed to look like. He hugged me quickly. He smelled clean, like cedar and laundry detergent. His coat was damp at the shoulders from the mist outside. You're taller than I expected, he said. I said, that's rude. He smiled. I mean it in a good way. We sat down. The first 10 minutes were fine. Better than fine, really. He was funny, attentive. If I were telling the story honestly, and I have to admit that for a little while I felt relieved. I thought, okay, good. I'm not crazy. This is normal. Then the small wrongness started creeping in. He never seemed to need a second to think before responding, but his responses were sometimes just off enough to make my skin prickle. Like he had studied conversation instead of living inside it. When I told him my office had just switched coffee brands and morale had collapsed, he smiled at the correct moment and said, that's devastating, but there was no warmth under it. No actual amusement. It was like hearing a laugh track. At one point, he mentioned the laundromat near my apartment. Not directly. He said, I passed that place with the flickering open sign near you the other day. Looks like it hasn't changed since 1998. I stopped with my glass halfway to my mouth. Near me? He blinked, then smiled. I meant near your neighborhood. Didn't you say you lived above shops? I had. That was true. And there was a laundromat a block over with a flickering sign. It could still have been a coincidence. That is the maddening thing. Almost everything was still explainable. I told myself to calm down. Our entrees came. He barely touched his food, just moved it around with his fork and kept watching me in these quiet little intervals that lasted a second too long. Not enough for a scene. Enough to make me aware of my hands, my voice, the way I swallowed. I started feeling observed in a way that had nothing to do with attraction. Then he asked, do you always leave your hall light on when you get home? The room didn't go silent. Nobody dropped a plate. No music stopped. But inside me something did. I set my fork down. What? He tilted his head very slightly, like I had misheard a harmless question. You mentioned once that you forget to turn lights off. I was joking. I had never mentioned that. I was sure. And even if I had, he said it with this strange carefulness, like he was testing how much he could say before I pulled away. I should have left then. I know that. I think about that sentence all the time. I should have left then. But I did what people do when they are caught between their instincts and social conditioning. I smiled tightly. I told myself I was overtired, keyed up, projecting. I reminded myself I was in a restaurant full of people. I reminded myself he was verified. That stupid blue shield had done its job, so well it was still arguing with my own nervous system. Then my phone buzzed. I glanced down. Safety alert. Your match has failed identity verification. Recent verification attempt did not match the verified profile. Do not continue this date if you feel unsafe. I think there was more text below that, some button to access help, but I never absorbed it because my pulse had slammed so hard into my throat I could hear it. When I looked up, he was smiling. Not broadly, not theatrically, just enough to show he understood exactly what I had seen. Everything okay? He asked. His voice was soft, the same voice from the voice notes. I remember the candlelight reflecting in the water glass by his hand. I remember the couple at the next table leaning close to each other, completely unaware. I remember thinking with perfect clarity, if I panic right now, I will make it harder to leave. So I picked up my napkin and said, "Sorry, work thing. I need to use the restroom." He nodded once. Of course. I stood, and my legs felt so weak for a second that I thought I might actually collapse into the table. But I didn't. I walked, not too fast, not too slow, past the bar and down the narrow hallway to the bathrooms. The moment the door closed behind me, I locked myself in a stall and read the notification again. There was a second alert now in the app itself. This account may be compromised. We recommend ending contact. If you are meeting in person, move towards staff or a populated area. My hands were shaking so badly I hit the wrong button twice trying to text Nina. I finally sent, he failed verification. At dinner. Call me now. Before I could put the phone down, a second message came from an unknown number. Don't make this embarrassing. I actually made a sound then, a small involuntary one, like I had been punched. He had my number. That was not impossible. We had moved off the app 2 days earlier, texting normally. But seeing it like that, outside the conversation thread, stripped of any pleasant tone, made the whole thing turn solid and ugly. I called Nina instead of waiting for her to call me. She answered on the first ring. What happened? I kept my voice low. The app sent an alert. It says he failed identity verification. Nina, I think he's been watching me. He knows where I live. Okay, she said immediately, and I will always love her for how steady she was. Listen to me. Do not go back and sit down. Go to the staff. Right now. I unlocked the stall and stepped out. He was standing in the hallway outside the bathroom, just a few feet away. I stopped so hard my heel slipped on the tile. He had his hands in his coat pockets. He did not look angry. That would almost have been easier. He looked calm, patient. You were taking a while, he said. The sound that came out of Nina's voice on the phone was sharp and tiny because she had heard him. I backed up without meaning to. He took one slow step forward and lowered his voice. You should put your phone away. People might get the wrong idea. My heart was beating so hard it felt mechanical. There is no wrong idea, I said, and even to me my voice sounded thin. Move. For a second he just watched me. Then he smiled again, smaller this time. You know, he said quietly, you were easier to talk to before someone told you to be scared. And that sentence, more than anything, made my whole body go cold. Because it meant he wasn't improvising. He had a theory about women like me. About fear and how it entered a room and who was allowed to name it. I turned and walked fast, not running yet, toward the bar. One of the servers looked up as I came around the corner, and I said, louder than I meant to, I need help. That changed everything. People noticed. The bartender straightened. The server stepped toward me. I said, the man I'm here with is not who he said he was. Please don't let him come near me. I felt ridiculous saying it. That is another thing I hate. Even in danger, part of you is worried about sounding dramatic. The bartender nodded at once. Okay, stay here. When I looked back, the hallway was empty. He was gone. Not out the front. Not to the bathroom. Just gone, or moving somewhere I couldn't see. The manager came over. Someone locked the side entrance. Someone else asked if I wanted police. I said yes before I could talk myself out of it. My phone was vibrating with Nina calling again, then texting, then calling. I could barely type. I kept scanning the room, the bar mirror, the front windows. expecting to see him reflected somewhere. When the police arrived, he was nowhere. Staff said they had not seen him leave. One of them thought he might have gone out through the kitchen door before they blocked it. I gave a statement with my coat still on because I could not stop shivering. The officer, a tired-looking woman with a blonde bun and chapped hands, asked all the usual questions. Did he threaten me? Did he touch me? Did I know his real name? Did I want an escort to my car? I told her about the texts, about the comments he had made, about the app alert. She listened, but I could feel the limits of what she could do settling around us like walls. By then Nina had arrived, breathless and furious, and insisted on driving behind me all the way home. I did not go inside alone. She came up with me, checked every room, every closet, even under the bed, half joking and half not. We sat on my couch with all the lights on, and I tried to explain why his smile had scared me more than anything else. Around midnight, after she had finally convinced me to drink water, she noticed my tote bag lying tipped over by the kitchen counter. Did you dump that out? No. She knelt and reached into the side pocket. When she pulled her hand back, she was holding a small white disc, smooth and flat, no bigger than a quarter. At first I thought it was one of those cheap wireless key finders. Then I understood. He had put a tracker in my bag. I don't know if he did it at the restaurant or before. Maybe when he hugged me hello. Maybe when he took my coat for a second and hung it over the chair like he was being polite. I only know that when Nina held it up between two fingers, I had the horrible instant certainty that none of this had started tonight. Tonight was just the first time I noticed. The next day became a blur of practical terror. Police took the tracker and added it to the report. Tandem sent me a carefully worded email saying the account had been suspended for suspicious activity and that user safety was their highest priority. They would not tell me exactly what had triggered the failure. They would not tell me how someone with a fake identity got verified in the first place. At work, I couldn't focus long enough to review a single claim. My supervisor sent me home after I burst into tears in the copy room because the printer made a noise behind me, and I thought, for one insane second, that someone had whispered my name. 2 days later, a detective called me. His name was Ortiz. He spoke in the low, even tone of someone trying not to inflame a frightened person. He said the name and photos on the profile belonged to a real man in Indianapolis who had recently reported identity theft after being locked out of several accounts. The real Daniel Mercer was married, had never used Tandem, and was, according to Detective Ortiz, deeply unsettled to learn his face had been used to meet women in person. When you say used, I asked, sitting on my bed with my shoes still on, how is that even possible? There was a pause. It's getting easier, he said. Stolen ID documents, manipulated images, synthetic video, voice cloning. Most systems catch it, some don't. Sometimes they catch it later. Have there been others? Another pause. We're looking into possible connections. That meant yes. He would not tell me more, which I understand now, but at the time it made everything worse. Your mind always fills silence with the darkest version it can imagine. After that, things got quieter for about a week. Quiet is not the same as over. I changed my locks, though the building manager reminded me no one should have had access to my unit. I bought heavier curtains. I stopped posting anything in real time. Nina stayed over twice. My brother, suddenly jolted into adulthood by actual fear, offered to drive over for the weekend and install a camera outside my door. The first truly bad thing after the date happened on a Tuesday night. It was just after 11. I was in bed but not sleeping, scrolling mindlessly with the TV on mute. Then I got a call from the building's main number. I almost didn't answer, but I thought maybe there was some issue downstairs, a package, plumbing, anything ordinary. A man's voice said, "Hi Mara, this is Greg from downstairs. We had a water leak reported in the stack below you. I need to come up and take a quick look at your bathroom ceiling." There really was a Greg in the building office. I had spoken to him maybe twice, and the voice on the phone sounded like Greg. Tired, nasal, local. I got out of bed and went to the door. Through the peephole, I saw a man in a dark jacket and a baseball cap standing in the hall. He had one hand down at his side, and the other in his pocket. No tools, no clipboard, no maintenance cart. Something in me stopped. I said through the door, "Can you hold up your ID?" The man in the hall did not move. Then the voice on the phone, still sounding almost exactly like Greg, said, "Mara, it's freezing out here." At the exact same time, the man outside the door smiled. I couldn't see his whole face through the peephole, but I saw enough. That slow smile. I backed away from the door, so fast I hit the wall behind me. The phone nearly slipped out of my hand. Then he spoke again, and the voice coming through the wood was not Greg's at all. It was his real voice, or at least the voice I had heard at dinner. "Don't do that," he said, almost gently. "Don't make me stand in the hall." I called 911 so badly the operator had to ask me twice for my address because I could barely get words out. While I was on the phone, he tried the handle once. Just once. Very lightly, like he was checking whether I had remembered to lock it. Then he knocked. 3 soft knocks. Not pounding. Not rage. Just that awful patience again. My neighbor across the hall, an older woman named Mrs. Haynes, opened her door a crack and said, "Can I help you?" The footsteps started almost immediately after that, fast down the stairwell. By the time officers arrived, he was gone. Mrs. Haynes told them she only got a glimpse of a man in a cap heading for the back exit. The hallway camera on my floor had been spray-painted black sometime in the previous hour. That was when I stopped thinking of this as a bad date and started thinking of it as a hunt. The police found very little, which is probably the most realistic part of the whole story. No fingerprints useful enough to run. No clear camera footage. The call from the building number turned out to be spoofed. The tracker in my bag was linked to a prepaid account. The car seen idling across from my building 2 nights later had stolen plates. Every solid thing dissolved when you touched it. Detective Ortiz finally told me there had been at least 4 women in Ohio and Indiana who had reported eerily similar experiences over the previous 8 months. Verified dating profiles. Real faces belonging to other people. Polite, normal conversation. Then increasingly invasive knowledge, location tracking, attempts to isolate them, fake service calls, fake emergencies. One woman had gotten into his car before realizing something was wrong. She jumped out at a red light and broke her wrist. Another had reported seeing him outside her office for days. And one woman in Fort Wayne had disappeared for almost 30 hours before turning up at a hospital 2 counties away, dehydrated, drugged, unable to remember most of what happened. That was the part Ortiz told me carefully, watching my face. They could not prove it was the same man. Not yet, but in the privacy of my own mind, I knew. After that, I moved in with Nina for a month. I kept going to work because staying home alone was worse. I changed routes, routines, grocery stores. If a car slowed near me, I memorized the plate before I even realized I was doing it. I stopped wearing earbuds outside. I looked at reflections in windows more than the people beside me. Every knock at a door, every unknown number, every sudden smile from a stranger made my stomach drop. I wish I could tell you there was a satisfying ending, that he was caught in a clean, cinematic way, that someone found a room full of stolen phones and IDs, and it all made sense after that. What actually happened was smaller and somehow more disturbing. 6 months later, police in Kentucky arrested a man on unrelated fraud charges. He had multiple fake IDs, stolen biometric data, face mapping software on an encrypted laptop, and a collection of dating app profile archives. There were enough similarities that Detective Ortiz called and asked me to come in for a lineup process related to digital evidence, not in person, just images. I looked at dozens of photos. Some resembled him. None were certainly him. That is the problem with a man who hides behind other faces. Even your memory starts to feel contaminated. The case never gave me the kind of certainty people want when they hear stories like this. No headline, no press conference, no moment where I could say, yes, that was him, and now he cannot hurt anyone again. For all I know, the man at dinner was arrested years ago under another name. For all I know, he is still out there using someone else's smile, someone else's jawline, someone else's life, waiting for a little blue shield to do the hard work for him. It's been 3 years now. I moved apartments. I got a different car. I don't use dating apps at all anymore, which sounds dramatic until you've had one turn into a doorway for somebody like that. I still check the peephole before I answer. I still don't trust unexpected calls from building management, delivery drivers, anyone. If a man knows too much too soon, I feel it like a temperature drop. Sometimes people say, "At least the app warned you." And they're right. It did. But what stays with me is not the warning. It's the amount of trust that came before it. I think that's the part people don't understand if they've never been through something like this. The scariest moment wasn't when the notification appeared. It wasn't even when he stood outside my apartment door using another man's voice. It was sitting across from him before any of that, while the candles burned low and the plates cooled, and I kept explaining away the feeling in my chest because some company had told me this person was safe. Sometimes I still picture that exact second, my phone lighting up on the white tablecloth, his face lifting slightly as I read, as if he already knew the system had finally caught up, as if he had seen that look of confusion and fear before, many times, on many faces. People like that do not always force their way in. Sometimes they are invited. Sometimes they borrow a name, a smile, a verified checkmark, and wait for you to do what decent people are trained to do: doubt yourself first. So if something feels wrong, even if you can't explain why, even if the profile looks clean, even if the badge is blue and official and comforting, listen to the part of you that tenses anyway. Because sometimes the only real thing in the room is your fear. And sometimes that is the only thing trying to keep you alive. Story number 5. Have you ever seen a sentence about yourself that you know you never wrote, but it still feels like it came from somewhere inside you? That was the part that got to me first. Not the app itself, not the fake profile, not even the messages. It was the feeling of reading my own private thoughts on a screen and realizing somebody, somewhere, knew me well enough to make it look like I had confessed them on purpose. I was 21 when this happened, and I lived alone in a basement-level apartment just off campus in Columbus, Ohio. It was one of those old brick buildings that had been chopped up into 4 units years ago, then painted over so many times that every doorframe looked swollen. My place was technically a ground-floor studio, but the windows sat so low to the pavement that people's shoes crossed by at eye level. When it rained, the light went gray by 4 in the afternoon. When the heat kicked on, the pipes made these knocking sounds in the walls that always reminded me of someone changing their mind outside the door. At the time, I was in my second year of college, studying psychology, working 15 hours a week at the campus library, and pretending I liked living alone more than I actually did. I had friends, but not the kind you see every day. My closest friend, Maya, lived across town with 2 roommates and a dog she treated like a person. My mom was in Kentucky with my little brother. My dad had been gone for years. Most nights it was just me, my laptop, whatever leftovers I'd stretched into dinner, and the sound of buses passing on High Street. Nothing about my life felt dangerous. That's important, I think, because when people imagine this kind of story, they picture someone reckless, or someone walking around in dark parking garages at midnight, or someone already mixed up in something messy. I wasn't like that. I was boring, careful, embarrassingly routine. I left for class at the same time every morning. I bought the same vanilla yogurt from the same little grocery store. I locked my windows, checked the stove twice, and kept a lamp on in the kitchen at night because I hated waking up to a completely dark apartment. So when Maya convinced me to download a dating app, it honestly felt like the most dramatic thing I'd done in months. You don't have to marry anybody, she told me over coffee one Sunday. Just talk to people. Flirt a little. Remind yourself there are still human beings in the world. I laughed and told her human beings were exactly the problem. But later that night, I made the profile anyway. I used 4 pictures, all normal ones. One from my cousin's wedding where I looked a little better than usual, one in a library mirror, one outside with a scarf on, one sitting on the floor with my mom's cat over Thanksgiving. For the bio, I kept it simple. I wrote that I was a psych student, worked too much, loved bad horror movies, and never knew what to say in bios. That was it. A few light jokes, nothing too personal. For 2 days, nothing weird happened. I got the usual mix of messages. Some boring, some annoying, some instantly deleted. A guy with a fish in every picture. A guy whose entire personality seemed to be owning a Jeep. A guy named Aaron who opened with, "You look like you'd ruin my life in a good way." Then on the third night, I opened the app while I was brushing my teeth, and my bio looked different. At first I thought I was just tired. My original line, psych student, library worker, bad at bios, was still there. Under it, though, was a sentence I hadn't written. I sleep with a lamp on because I hate waking up in the dark. I remember standing there with the toothbrush in my hand, staring at the screen like it might fix itself if I waited. It was such a small thing, and technically it was true, but I had never written that anywhere. Not on the app, not online, nowhere public. It felt too specific to be random and too harmless to be a threat. So I did what people usually do when something small but wrong happens. I made it less wrong in my head. Maybe the app had one of those weird prompt features. Maybe I'd half-written it while falling asleep and forgotten. Maybe I was more tired than I realized. I deleted the line and changed my password. The next morning I told Maya about it while we were waiting for coffee between classes. She laughed. "You probably wrote it while dissociating." "Thanks, that really helps." "I'm serious," she said. "I've sent emails I do not remember typing. College does that to your brain." I let myself believe her because I wanted to. For another day, nothing happened. Then Thursday night, I came home from work at the library around 9:30. It had rained all afternoon. My apartment smelled faintly like wet concrete, the way it always did after a storm. I microwaved leftover pasta, showered, put on an old t-shirt, and climbed into bed with my laptop. I opened the app without thinking about it. My bio had changed again. This time there were 2 new lines. "Still can't sit with my back to a window after what happened when I was 10. I pretend loud people don't scare me as much as they do." I felt cold so quickly it was almost embarrassing. The first line referred to something I had told exactly one person in the last 3 years, and that was a therapist I stopped seeing after high school. When I was 10, there had been an incident at my mom's old apartment. A man had been looking through the back window while I was doing homework at the kitchen table. He never got inside. Nothing happened in the way people mean when they say that. But I remembered his face pressed close to the glass, and after that I hated uncovered windows at night. I had never posted that anywhere. Never joked about it. Never put it in writing online. The second line was worse in a different way because it sounded like something I might have admitted in a diary, not something anyone else would notice. My hands actually started shaking. I checked my email. No login alerts. I checked the photos, the messages, the account settings. Nothing else looked touched. Just the bio. I deleted the lines. Changed the password again. Logged out of every device. Turned on 2-factor authentication. Then I sat on the edge of my bed listening to the pipes tick inside the wall and feeling stupid for being scared of text on a screen. I called Maya. "This isn't funny anymore," I said. She was quiet for a second. "Did you tell anybody that stuff?" "No." "Like nobody?" "I'm telling you no." "Then it's either somebody messing with you who knows you, or your phone is compromised." The word compromised made it sound bigger, more official, and somehow more real. She came over the next evening with tacos and a charger, and the kind of energy people bring when they've decided your problem is now their project. We sat at my tiny kitchen table while she looked through my phone settings like she knew what she was doing. "Do you have Face ID on this?" "Yes." "Did anybody ever use your phone? Like an ex, a friend, anybody?" "There's no ex. That would require a life." She gave me a look. "You know what I mean." I did. I just didn't have a good answer. No one used my phone. No one had my passwords. No one came into my apartment except maintenance once a few weeks earlier, when the kitchen sink had started leaking under the cabinet. That thought stuck a little, though. "Who fixed your sink?" Maya asked. "I don't know, the building maintenance guy. The landlord sent him." "Was he weird?" "No, just old. Quiet." "Did he go near your laptop?" I almost said no, then paused. My laptop had been open on the table that day because I was writing a paper before class. I remembered moving it so he could get under the sink. He'd only been there maybe 20 minutes. That doesn't mean anything, I said. It doesn't, Maya agreed, but I could tell she had filed it away. For a few days, the app stayed normal. I started to think maybe the password changes had fixed it. Maybe someone had gotten in somehow, done their little stunt, and moved on. I even matched with a guy named Daniel who seemed almost aggressively normal. He had one picture in a baseball cap, one at a brewery, one with his sister's dog. His messages were bland in a comforting way. Then on Tuesday afternoon, while I was shelving returns at the library, my phone buzzed. Your profile has been updated. I felt sick before I even opened it. There was a new sentence. She hates the basement after rain because the smell comes up through the vents. I didn't delete it right away. I just stood in the quiet between the shelves with a stack of books in my arms and read that line over and over. Because that one was local. That one wasn't just personal. It belonged to the apartment, to the building, to the damp, mineral smell that rose from the basement laundry room every time it stormed. To the thing I thought in private when the air changed and the vents breathed that moldy underground smell into my room. I remember calling Maya from the staff stairwell. She answered on the second ring. Tell me. He knows where I live. Who? I don't know. Somebody. The bio changed again. There was a pause. Then her voice went flatter, steadier. Leave work with someone. Don't go home alone. I laughed a little because it sounded extreme, but the laugh didn't come out right. I'm serious, she said. You need to report it. So I did. Not the police first. The landlord. His name was Mr. Barlow, and he always smelled like cigarettes and mint gum. He met me outside the building in a brown jacket and looked at my screenshots with the expression of a man being asked to troubleshoot Wi-Fi on a plane. Could be some kid in the building messing around, he said. Who has access to the basement? All tenants. Laundry's down there. And maintenance? Sure. I told him I wanted the code to the exterior basement door changed. He sighed like I was asking him to replace the roof. That door barely locks as it is. Then fix it. He glanced at me, maybe realizing I wasn't going to let it go. I'll have Rick look at it. Rick? The maintenance guy. That was the first time I heard his name. I asked what he looked like, even though I already knew. Tall, gray beard, works nights sometimes. You've probably seen him. I had. Once in the hallway after the sink repair, carrying a toolbox. Once outside by the trash cans, smoking beside his truck. He'd nodded at me both times. Nothing memorable. The kind of face your brain drops the second you turn away. That night, Maya insisted on staying over. We ordered cheap Thai food, watched half a movie, and pretended we were not listening to every noise from the hallway. Around midnight, she fell asleep on top of my comforter. I stayed awake longer than I meant to, scrolling through my screenshots again. At 1:17 a.m., the app sent another notification. Daniel sent you a message. I opened it. Hey, weird question. Do you have laundry in your building, or do you use a laundromat? My throat tightened. I stared at the message so long that the screen dimmed in my hand. It could have been coincidence. It could have been nothing. But that was what was happening over and over by then. Everything could have been nothing until it stacked up too high to ignore. I didn't reply. I unmatched him and turned the phone face down. The next day, I deleted the app entirely. I thought that would be the end of it. Instead, it got worse. Because even after I deleted it, the notifications kept coming. Not from the app itself. From my email. Your profile has been updated. Your profile is now visible. You have a new admirer nearby. I reset the password through my laptop and deleted the account. Then I deleted the account again from the confirmation email. Then I checked the website in a browser, and it still existed. My pictures were there. My name was there. And the bio had grown. She keeps the yellow mug turned inward, because the crack looks like a mouth. She checks the lock 3 times. She doesn't remember that I've already been inside. I don't think I breathed for a full second. That yellow mug was in my kitchen cabinet. I had turned it inward that morning because, yes, the crack did look like a little open mouth, and it unsettled me if I caught it in the corner of my eye. Nobody should have known that. Nobody outside the apartment even knew I owned that mug. Maya drove me to the police station. I want to be fair here. The officer we spoke to wasn't rude. He wasn't lazy. He just looked like a man who had heard 10 versions of digital harassment that week and had learned to ration his alarm. He scrolled through the screenshots, nodded a lot, asked whether I had an ex-boyfriend, whether anyone had threatened me directly, whether anything had been stolen from my apartment. No, I said, but somebody knows things they shouldn't know. Have you had your devices checked? Not professionally. He gave me a case number and said they'd note it. He advised me to secure my accounts, stay with a friend if I felt unsafe, and call immediately if the person showed up in real life or made a direct threat. That was the phrase he used. Direct threat. As if someone writing "I've already been inside" wasn't enough. Maya got angry in the parking lot. I didn't. I was too tired by then. Fear had started turning into that thin, jittery exhaustion where your body feels like it's buzzing under the skin. I stayed at her apartment for 2 nights. On the 3rd day, I had to go back because I needed clothes, class notes, my charger, all the stupid pieces of a normal life. Maya came with me. We unlocked my door and stood there listening before we went inside. Nothing looked disturbed. The bed was unmade from the morning I'd rushed out. The dishes were still in the sink. The air felt stale. Safe, almost. Then Maya walked to the kitchen and said, very quietly, "Did you leave this here?" My stomach dropped before I even asked what she meant. On the table, right in the center where I ate dinner every night, was a spiral notebook. It took me a second to recognize it, because I hadn't seen it in years. It was an old journal from high school. Cheap black cover, bent corner. One of those notebooks I used to write in when I couldn't sleep. I had kept it in a taped cardboard box under the bed with old class notes and winter scarves and things I didn't touch. I hadn't taken it out. I hadn't even remembered it was there. Maya looked at me. "Call them." The police came back, finally with a little more urgency this time. They took the notebook, dusted a few surfaces, asked whether I was sure I hadn't moved it myself. One officer checked the windows. Another looked under the bed and inside the closet. They found no one. No forced entry either. But the box under my bed had been opened. That changed everything in my head. Until then, there had still been a part of me trying to keep the fear organized, trying to trap it inside screens and passwords and login histories. A hack was frightening, but it stayed abstract. It lived in the phone. An open box under the bed was different. It meant hands, breath, someone standing where I slept. For the next week, I moved through my days like someone recovering from a fever. I stayed with Maya most nights, but sometimes I still had to return to the apartment for classes or work. Mr. Barlow finally changed the basement lock. He also installed a cheap camera facing the back entrance, though he complained about the cost the entire time. Rick, the maintenance guy, stopped by one afternoon while I was there. That was the first time I really looked at him. He was taller than I remembered, maybe mid-50s, with a gray beard and deep lines around his mouth. He stood half inside the doorway, toolbox in one hand. "Landlord said you've had some trouble," he said. His voice was softer than I expected. "Yeah." He nodded like he understood more than I'd told him. "Back door sticks. I'll get that fixed." "Okay." His eyes moved past me, just briefly, into the apartment. Not in a dramatic, movie villain way. Just a glance. But it made every muscle in my back tighten. "You living alone?" he asked. I answered too fast. No. It was a lie, and he knew it was a lie. Something in his face changed, almost too small to catch. Then he gave a little shrug. "Well," he said, "if you hear anything in the pipes or down in the basement, old buildings do that. Don't let your imagination make it worse." After he left, I locked the door and stood there with my hand still on the knob. Because maybe he meant nothing, but maybe he meant exactly what it sounded like. That night I searched his name online and found almost nothing. A property maintenance license, a Facebook page with no recent posts, a blurry photo from a community softball team from years earlier. I didn't sleep. 2 days later, I got a text from an unknown number. "You left your basement light on." I stared at it until the screen blurred. Then I typed, "Who is this?" No answer. I blocked the number. Another text came from a different one 20 minutes later. "You should really close your curtains earlier." After that, I stopped going back alone. I also stopped feeling embarrassed. Once fear gets specific enough, shame burns off. You no longer care if you sound dramatic. You just want to stay alive. The last night I spent in that apartment happened on a Thursday in late October. Maya was out of town for her cousin's engagement party. My mom offered to drive up, but it was already evening, and I told her not to. I had an early exam the next morning, and all I wanted was one quiet night in my own bed, door locked, chain on, kitchen chair wedged under the knob like that would somehow matter. It had rained all day. By 9, the whole building smelled damp. The vent near the floor was pushing up that basement smell again, cold and earthy, like wet stone and detergent and something older underneath. I kept the TV on low for noise while I studied, then gave up around 11 and made tea in the yellow mug without thinking. At 11:43, my phone buzzed. I had not re-downloaded the app. I had deleted the account, but the notification was from my email. "Your profile has been updated." I think I knew before I opened it. My hands were numb. My chest felt hollow. I signed in through the browser, and there it was. The bio was almost entirely different now. It was written in short, neat lines, as if whoever had been doing this had finally stopped pretending to sound like me. She was lonelier than she admitted. She wanted someone who would wait. She wanted someone who would learn the sounds of the building. "She is ready now." I felt this horrible pressure in my ears, like when an elevator drops too fast. Then the final line loaded. "I'm ready to meet him in the basement." At that exact moment, from somewhere below me, I heard a door close. Not the front entrance to the building. Not the hallway upstairs. The basement door. A heavy, muffled thud from directly under the floor. Every part of me went cold. I backed away from the table without taking my eyes off the screen. My first instinct was stupid and simple. Lock the door. As if that solved anything. As if he wasn't maybe already inside. Then I heard it. 3 slow knocks. Not at my apartment door. From the vent. I don't know if I can explain how wrong that sound was. It was faint, filtered through metal and distance, but unmistakably deliberate. 3 taps, a pause, then 2 more. I grabbed my phone and called 911 with hands so slippery I almost dropped it. The operator answered. I whispered my address and told her someone was in the basement and had been stalking me. She started asking questions, calm and methodical. Was he in my apartment? Had I seen a weapon? Could I get out safely? That was when my phone buzzed again. An email preview dropped across the top of the screen. "Come down. I'm tired of waiting." I made a sound I had never heard come out of my own body. The operator heard it. "Ma'am, stay on the line. Officers are en route." Then, from the hallway outside my door, I heard footsteps. Slow, unhurried. The floorboards just beyond the threshold creaked once, then again. I backed into the bathroom and locked that door too, even though it was thin hollow wood and wouldn't stop anybody. I climbed onto the edge of the tub and held the phone against my mouth to keep my breathing quiet. The footsteps stopped right outside the apartment. Then my doorknob moved. Not violently. Not pounding, not rattling. Just a soft, testing turn. Once. Twice. Then a man's voice, low enough that I almost thought I imagined it. "Lena." No one had said my name like that before. Gently. Patiently. Like he was trying not to scare me, which was somehow the worst part. I started crying without making noise. My whole body shook so hard my teeth clicked together. The operator kept talking. I barely heard her. All I could hear was the silence outside the bathroom door, and beyond that, the apartment, and beyond that, the building holding its breath. A few seconds later, there was another sound. The chain on my front door slid tight, then snapped. He had a key. I knew it in the same instant I heard the door open. He moved around the apartment slowly. I could tell by the sounds, the little shifts in the floor, the careful rhythm of someone who knew the layout and did not need to hurry. A drawer opened, closed. The kitchen chair scraped. There was the faint clink of ceramic. I realized with this detached, sick clarity that he was touching my things while I hid 6 feet away. The bathroom knob turned. I held the lock with one hand, even though that was pointless, like pressing against a dream. "Lena," he said again, closer now. "You don't have to make this ugly." I can still hear that sentence sometimes. Not because it was shouted. Because it wasn't. Because it sounded practiced. Then, all at once, chaos. Heavy pounding from the main entrance to the building, someone yelling police, a burst of running footsteps upstairs, another voice outside, and the bathroom door jerked once in his hand before he let go. I heard him move fast for the first time. Not toward me. Away. The apartment door banged open wider. Someone shouted. There was a crash from the kitchen, something metal hitting the floor, then footsteps tearing back out into the hall. I unlocked the bathroom so clumsily I nearly broke the latch, and when I came out there were 2 officers in my apartment, guns drawn, one near the doorway and one by the kitchen. The yellow mug was shattered on the floor. The back of the apartment window was open half an inch, enough to let rain-scented air slide in. Rick was gone. They found him because of the camera at the back entrance, and because the officer who'd responded recognized him from being on the property when they arrived. He had left his truck parked 2 blocks over. Inside the basement storage room, behind the old washers, they found a folding chair, bottled water, cigarette butts, a blanket, and a grocery bag full of things that belonged to me. Hair ties, a library nantig, a spoon from my drawer, photocopies of pages from my journal. There was also a small toolkit, a ring of copied keys, and a cheap flash drive the detective later told me probably held login information pulled from my laptop when he'd first come to repair the sink. He had been inside my apartment more than once. The landlord admitted Rick had master keys for all 4 units, something he had neglected to mention earlier because, in his words, maintenance always has keys. The police believed Rick had been using the dating profile to unsettle me, test me, and eventually lure me downstairs or catch me off balance enough to come in while I panicked. That part makes me sick even now, the planning of it, the patience, the way he didn't rush. They charged him eventually, but not right away. He disappeared for 11 days after that night. Just vanished. Every creak in every hallway during those 11 days felt personal. Every stranger who looked at me too long in public made my skin crawl. I stayed with Maya, then with my mom. I slept with lights on in every room and still woke up convinced someone was standing in the corner. They caught him in Dayton after he tried to use another copied key at a property owned by the same management company. I was told he had done concerning things before. Boundary violations, letting himself into units without notice. Complaints that never quite became cases. The kind of behavior that gets passed around as rumor until it finally hardens into evidence. I moved out before the month ended. I am 26 now, and I still do certain things without thinking. I check every closet in any new place I stay. I keep curtains closed before sunset. I don't use dating apps. I don't keep journals in the house. If maintenance needs to come in, someone is with me always. I don't care how inconvenient it is. And basements, even clean ones, even bright ones, still make something in my chest lock up. People ask sometimes what the worst part was. The break-in, the voice at the door, the journal on the table. Honestly, it was the bio. It was watching my private self get rewritten by someone who thought access meant intimacy. Someone who mistook observation for understanding. Someone who learned my fears the way people learn a bus schedule, just to be there at the right time. You like to think there is a clean line between online and real life. A screen, a wall, a locked door. But there isn't always. Sometimes all a person needs is patience, a key, and enough quiet to study you. So when something small feels wrong, don't explain it away just because it sounds too strange to be true. Don't worry about seeming paranoid. Don't wait for a direct threat. Sometimes the scariest people never raise their voices. They just learn your habits, change a sentence, and wait downstairs for you to come looking. Story number 6. Have you ever blocked someone and still felt like they had found a way to stay in your life anyway? Not through friends, not through fake numbers, not through some new account with a different name. I mean, really stay. Like they were still in the room somehow, still reaching into your day, still touching things they should not have been able to touch. That's what this is about. My name is Evan. I was 28 when this happened, and I was living alone in a second-floor apartment just outside Columbus, Ohio. It was one of those places built in the early 2000s that already looked tired: beige siding, narrow balconies, weak hallway lights. The kind of complex where everyone kept to themselves, but you still heard too much through the walls. Toilet flushes, arguments, dogs skidding across laminate floors, the occasional baby crying at 2 in the morning. At the time, I worked for a regional insurance company doing claims processing. It was boring, stable, and mostly remote. My life was very normal. I woke up around 7:30, made coffee, answered emails, took a walk around the parking lot during lunch, microwaved the same couple of meals every week, watched basketball at night, then went to bed too late while telling myself I'd fix my sleep schedule tomorrow. I wasn't reckless. I wasn't the kind of guy who went looking for trouble. I'd been single for almost a year after a long relationship ended, and eventually I did what a lot of people do when they get lonely enough. I downloaded a dating app and convinced myself I was being proactive instead of sad. I matched with a woman named Leah. Her profile looked normal. She was 26, lived maybe 15 minutes away, worked in dental billing, liked old horror movies, thrift stores, and black coffee. Her pictures weren't too perfect, which made them feel real. She had one where she was laughing with her eyes closed, one in a bookstore, one in a winter coat with bad overhead lighting. Nothing about her set off alarms. If anything, she seemed a little plain. Our messages started out easy. She was funny in a dry way, fast with replies, and oddly direct. Within an hour of talking, she told me she hated people who played games online and appreciated that I sounded consistent. That was the word she used, consistent. At the time it felt flattering. Looking back, it feels different. We talked for 3 days and agreed to meet at a bar and grill near the freeway. Neutral place, public, not too loud. It was raining that night, one of those cold, thin rains that made every parking lot shine under the lights. I remember wiping my windshield at a red light and feeling that stupid first date mix of hope and annoyance. Hope that maybe I'd meet someone I actually liked. Annoyance that I was 30 minutes from home in wet shoes for a stranger. She was already there when I walked in. The first thing that struck me was that she looked exactly like her pictures, and somehow also not like them at all. She had the same face, same dark hair, same small smile, but in person there was something very fixed about the way she watched me. Most people glance up when you approach, and then look away, smile, adjust their posture, something normal. Leah just looked straight at me like she had been waiting a long time. "Evan," she said, like she was confirming something. "Leah." She smiled. "You're taller than I thought." It wasn't a bad date at first. Not really. We ordered drinks, then food. She asked good questions, remembered details from our messages, laughed in the right places. But maybe 20 minutes in, I started noticing little things that made me feel off balance. She knew my middle name. Not from the app. I never put it there. She used it casually, almost like a joke. "You seem like such a Daniel," she said, grinning into her glass. I laughed because I didn't know what else to do. "How do you know my middle name?" She shrugged. "Lucky guess." That should have bothered me more than it did. Then she mentioned the neighborhood where I lived. Not the exact complex, just the area. She said she had almost suggested a coffee shop nearby because it was close to your place. I remember pausing with my fork halfway up. "I don't think I told you where I live." "You mentioned the Kroger off Hamilton once," she said. I just figured. That was plausible enough that I let it go. I had probably mentioned it. People say little things without thinking. That's what I told myself. Still, the date kept feeling stranger. Every time I talked about something from my life, she'd lean in too far, like she wasn't just listening, she was collecting. She wanted to know what floor I lived on, whether I had family nearby, whether I worked from home every day or only some days, whether my apartment building had security doors. She smiled while asking, like these were light questions, but there was a tightness in it, a hunger. At one point she asked, Do you ever worry how easy it is for someone to learn a person's routine now? I thought she was talking generally, social media, location sharing, all that. I said something like, I guess if you post everything. She looked at me for a second and said, people post more than they think. That was the moment I knew I didn't want a second date. Nothing dramatic happened. She didn't threaten me. She didn't scream. She didn't even say anything clearly wrong. But sometimes your body decides before your mind catches up. Mine had decided. My shoulders stayed tense. I kept checking the door. I started thinking about leaving. When the check came, I offered to split it. She said, no, it's okay. You can get it next time. I told her as gently as I could, let's just split it tonight. That made her expression change for a second. Just a second. Her smile stayed there, but it went empty. She nodded. Sure. Outside, the rain had gotten heavier. We stood under the awning for maybe 10 awkward seconds while people hurried past us toward their cars. Then she said, you should be careful driving home. Those roads get really dark near your turn. I stared at her. What turn? Again, that tiny little shrug. Just saying. Ohio roads. I drove home with both hands on the wheel and the radio off. By the time I got back to my apartment, I had convinced myself I was being dramatic. Bad date, weird woman, end of story. That was it. I sent one polite message saying I didn't feel a connection, wished her well, then I unmatched her and deleted the app. I remember feeling relieved. That relief lasted maybe 10 hours. The next morning I was making coffee when I looked down at my phone and saw the app icon back on my home screen. I stood there for a second, half awake, trying to make sense of it. I knew I deleted it. I had held the icon down, removed the app, watched it disappear. I even remembered doing it because it felt symbolic, like clearing a little mess out of my life. I figured I must have made a mistake. Maybe I had only removed it from the home screen and not actually deleted it. So I deleted it again. It came back that evening. Not after I downloaded it. Not after a software update. I picked up my phone after a shower, and there it was again. This time I felt a colder kind of confusion. I opened my App Store history, changed my Apple ID password, turned off automatic downloads, deleted the app, restarted my phone. The next morning it was on my iPad. I almost never used that iPad. It sat on my coffee table under a stack of mail, mostly for streaming games when friends came over. I hadn't touched it in days, but there was the same app, freshly installed, notification badge glowing red in the corner. One new message. I stared at it for a while before I opened it. It was from Leah. No hello. No fake innocence. Just a photo. It was a picture of the road leading into my apartment complex, taken through a car windshield at dusk. At first I thought it had to be old somehow, maybe something pulled from social media, maybe some trick, but I knew that road. There was a weird leaning speed limit sign near the entrance, and a broken branch hanging from a tree over the curb. Both were in the picture. Beneath the photo she had written, nice place. Quiet. I felt heat go through my chest so fast I almost dropped the iPad. I checked the date, the timestamp. Sent 8 minutes earlier. I called the app support line, which of course didn't really exist in any useful way. I filled out a report. I blocked her account. I deleted the app from my iPad and phone again. Then I called my friend Marcus. Marcus and I had known each other since college. He's the kind of guy who can make anything sound manageable, which is good until you need someone to tell you that you're actually in danger. He answered on the second ring. What's up? I told him everything. There was a pause, then he said, okay, that's weird, but maybe she drove by once and took a picture. It's creepy, but it doesn't mean she's, like, outside your window. You don't get it. The app keeps reinstalling. That part sounds like an Apple issue. She knows where I live. Did you ever send her anything from your place? I don't think so. Then maybe she got it from your number, reverse search, social media, whatever. People find stuff. I hated that he was making sense while also making me feel worse. So what do I do? Document it. Change passwords. Maybe call the cops if she shows up. If she shows up. That phrase stuck with me. That night I checked the locks 3 times before bed. My apartment was small enough that from the bedroom I could see straight into the short hallway that led to the front door. There was a dim orange glow from the parking lot coming through the blinds. I lay there listening to rain tap the window unit and told myself this was temporary. Weird people existed. The internet made people weird. I just had to be smart. At 1:13 in the morning, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. I picked it up. The app was back. My stomach dropped so hard it almost hurt. Another message from Leah. Another photo. This one was closer. It showed the row of mailboxes outside my building, taken at night. The numbers were visible in the yellow wash of the security light. I sat up so fast the sheet twisted around my legs. The message beneath it said, "You really should replace that bulb above the stairwell. It flickers." I didn't look through the peephole. I didn't go to the window. I called 911. I felt stupid doing it. My voice sounded stupid to my own ears. Too soft, too apologetic. I kept hearing how it sounded, like I was wasting someone's time with app drama and creepy photos. The dispatcher was patient but flat. She asked if I saw anyone outside now. I said no. She asked if anyone had tried to enter my apartment. I said no. She asked if I was in immediate danger. I said I didn't know. A patrol car came by 25 minutes later. By then there was nothing outside. The officer was polite in that tired way people get at 1 in the morning. He looked at the screenshots, nodded, and told me to keep documenting everything. He said unless she made a direct threat or trespassed in a way they could prove, there wasn't much they could do yet. "Get a camera if you can," he said, "and don't engage." I didn't sleep after that. The next few days came in waves. Nothing all morning, so I'd start thinking maybe it was over. Then around lunch or late afternoon, the app would reappear on one of my devices. Phone, iPad, laptop, once even on my old Mac Mini that I hadn't used in months. Always one notification. Always her. Each message had a photo, and each photo was closer. The dumpster area behind my building. The cracked concrete by the back entrance. The laundromat across the lot. The bottom of my stairwell. A shot of my balcony from the parking lot, zoomed in enough that I could see the cheap folding chair I kept out there. Then a picture of my actual front door, taken from only a few feet away. The number plate was clear. The little scratch near the deadbolt was clear. A corner of my doormat, the one my sister bought me as a joke that said welcome, I guess, was visible at the bottom. The text under that one said, "You should really stop ordering Thai food so often. The containers pile up." I got sick in my sink after reading it, because that was true. I had left takeout containers in a trash bag by the door the night before, meaning whoever took that photo had been close enough to notice them. I left work chat running on my laptop and called my manager to say I had a family emergency. Then I drove straight to the phone store and bought a new phone. Different brand, different number, no restored backup. I set it up from scratch in the parking lot like my life depended on it. For 4 hours, nothing happened. I almost cried from relief. Then, just before 6, the new phone buzzed. No app icon, just a text from an unknown number with a single image attached. It was a photo of my car in the store parking lot. The caption said, "This one was smart. Proud of you." I remember actually looking around like an animal. Not like a person checking his surroundings like prey. My vision felt weird and flat. Everyone around me seemed normal in a way that made me feel more insane. People pushing carts, kids whining, someone loading mulch bags into a truck, and somewhere among them maybe this woman was standing still and watching me come apart. I drove to Marcus's place instead of home. When he opened the door and saw my face, his own expression changed immediately. "Okay," he said. "Okay, come in." I showed him the messages, the photos, the new text. He didn't minimize it anymore. He made us both coffee even though it was evening and neither of us needed more caffeine. Then he sat across from me at his kitchen table and said, "Tell me every single thing from the date. All of it." So I did. The questions she asked. The way she talked. The middle name thing. The neighborhood thing. The odd comment about routines. Everything. When I mentioned that I had left my phone on the table, once while I went to the bathroom, Marcus leaned back. "How long?" "I don't know." A minute? She could have looked through it. Not enough to do all this. You'd be surprised. He worked in IT support for a hospital network. Not a hacker movie type, just a guy who knew how careless most people were with their devices. He took my old phone, which I had powered off, and started checking settings. 10 minutes later, he looked up at me with this grim little expression I'll never forget. "Evan." "What?" "There's a management profile on here." I didn't know what that meant. He explained it in the simplest way he could. Something had been installed giving outside control over app deployment, permissions, probably location in some form. It wasn't something that just happened by accident. Someone had put it there. How? Probably while your phone was unlocked. I thought about the date, about leaving the table, about her smile when I came back and she was holding my drink glass by the stem like she'd barely moved. Marcus kept going through settings. She had also added a recovery email I didn't recognize to one of my older accounts. She'd probably used my phone itself to approve changes, which meant security alerts never mattered because they were confirmed on my own device in real time. Once she was in, she could keep chasing me across anything synced to my accounts. It made horrible sense. Not supernatural, not impossible, just patient, invasive, smart. He helped me spend the next 3 hours changing everything. Email passwords, banking, cloud storage, utilities, social accounts, work logins, all of it. We wiped the old phone, signed out every device we could think of, reset security questions, removed unknown sessions, turned off location history. It felt like trying to clean up after someone had been living invisibly inside my life. At around midnight, Marcus said, "Stay here tonight." I did. For a few hours I felt almost safe. Then at 3:06 in the morning, there was a knock at his apartment door. 3 soft taps. Marcus and I both froze. He mouthed, "Did you tell her I live here?" I shook my head. The knocking came again. Same pattern. 3 taps. Marcus grabbed the heavy flashlight he kept by the kitchen and went to the peephole. I was right behind him, shaking so hard my teeth actually clicked once. He looked for maybe 2 seconds, then stepped back. No one's there. We waited. Then my new phone buzzed in my hand. Unknown number. A photo message. It was a picture of Marcus looking through the peephole, taken from the dark hallway outside. The caption said, "Wrong door tonight." I don't remember deciding to call 911 that time. I just know I was suddenly on the phone saying my name and address too fast. Officers came quickly, but again, no one was there by the time they arrived. The hallway camera on Marcus's floor had been broken for over a month. Of course it had. After that, the police took it more seriously. We filed a formal report, handed over screenshots, numbers, timestamps, everything. A detective called me the next day and said they would try to subpoena account information, but warned me that cyber-stalking cases moved slowly and people used fake credentials all the time. "Do you know her full name?" he asked. "Leah Morgan." "We'll see if that's real." It wasn't. The photos stopped for 2 days after that. No reinstallations. No texts. Nothing. I stayed with Marcus, then at my sister's house one night, then finally went back to my apartment because I had to. I couldn't disappear from my own life forever. The complex manager changed my locks, mostly because I scared him enough, and I bought cameras for my door and balcony. I started sleeping with lights on. I stopped taking the same route to the grocery store. I checked reflections in windows. I noticed every parked car. You hear stories about paranoia and think it means exaggerated fear. Sometimes it just means your fear has become practical. The turning point came on a Thursday. Cold, clear night. No rain, no wind. One of those winter evenings where sound carries too far. I had just finished heating up soup and was standing in my kitchen when my laptop screen lit up on the counter. I had closed it an hour earlier. Now it was awake. The dating app was open. I know how that sounds, and I don't care. It was open, already logged in. Her chat at the top. There was a live typing bubble moving. Then a message came through. "Look outside." I stepped back so fast I hit the edge of the counter with my hip. Another message. Not the parking lot. The balcony. I turned my head toward the sliding glass door. The blinds were mostly shut, but not fully. Just enough of a gap that I could see darkness beyond the glass and a pale shape standing there, very still. I could not breathe for a second. Then the shape lifted a hand and tapped once on the glass. Not loud, just enough. I grabbed my phone and called 911 while backing into the hallway. My voice broke immediately. I told the dispatcher someone was on my balcony, second floor, outside my apartment right now. The dispatcher told me to stay hidden, doors locked, officers were coming. The tapping came again, a little harder this time. Then I heard the metal rattle of the balcony railing. I realized, with this awful slow shock, that there was a maintenance ladder sometimes left behind the building near the utility area. Anyone could have dragged it over. Anyone could have climbed up. My front door camera pinged. Movement detected. She was at the front door too. I didn't understand. Then I did. It wasn't her at both places. She had propped something in front of the camera, maybe a looped image, maybe just triggered it earlier. It didn't matter. She wanted me looking the wrong way. The balcony door handle moved. Not fully, but enough to make that tiny hard click of pressure against the lock. I ran, not out the front, into the bathroom, which had no windows, and locked myself inside like a child. I sat on the floor with my back against the tub, phone to my ear, listening to the dispatcher keep talking while the apartment around me made small noises I had never noticed before. Fridge compressor, pipes in the wall, my own breathing. Then a sound I did notice. The sliding door opening. It was faint but real. A dull track noise, then the whisper of blinds moving. The dispatcher heard something change in my voice and said, "Stay on the line with me." Footsteps. Slow. Inside my apartment. Not rushing, not searching. Just walking. I started crying then, quietly, in this embarrassed, furious way, because some part of me still hated sounding weak even while I thought I might die. A woman's voice, very calm, from somewhere near the kitchen. "Evan." I pressed a hand over my mouth. She kept talking like we were on a second date, and I was being rude by not answering. "I know you're scared. I know they told you not to respond. That was never the point." A pause. Then closer, maybe in the hallway. "You shouldn't have blocked me." The bathroom doorknob turned once. It held. Turned again, harder. I heard sirens then, not close yet but getting there, and the doorknob stopped moving. For maybe 2 full seconds there was no sound at all. Then footsteps going away fast. A crash from the living room, probably the balcony door, maybe a chair knocked over. Then nothing. Police found the ladder below my balcony. They found a shoe print on the rail. They found the sliding door forced just enough to defeat the weak latch. One officer walked my apartment with me while I shook and pointed out what was moved. A cup in the sink. The blinds bent. My laptop open. One of the cameras unplugged. On my kitchen counter, under a magnet from my fridge, was a printed photograph. It was me asleep in bed, taken from inside my bedroom window. I don't know when. There was writing on the back. "Blocking only works online." That was the line from the prompt you gave me. And I wish I could say reality never handed me something that neat and horrible, but it did. After that, everything moved faster. The detective told me they finally had something tangible, unlawful entry, stalking, digital intrusion. They traced one of the burner numbers to a prepaid phone bought with cash, but security footage from the store gave them a face. Not because the system was brilliant, but because stalkers are still people, and people eventually get sloppy when they think obsession is destiny. Her real name wasn't Leah, at least not the one she gave me. She had a record under another name in another county, mostly harassment, trespassing, one protective order from a former coworker that had expired. Nothing severe enough to keep her off an app forever. Nothing severe enough to warn me. They arrested her 3 days later in the parking lot of a motel off the highway. In her room they found printed maps of my area, my old public records info, copies of photos from my social media, and a notebook full of details about my routine. Wake time, grocery day, work call schedule. Even the nights my kitchen light stayed on later than usual. She had written interpretations next to things, like she was building a private language out of my life. One line in particular still bothers me. When subject resists, increase presence. That's what all of it had been. Not random chaos. Presence. She was trying to make herself unavoidable. To teach me that boundaries were imaginary. I moved after that. Not immediately, but within 2 months. New complex, better security, different side of town. I changed jobs a year later. I stopped using dating apps completely. I stopped posting in real time. I learned how much of myself had been hanging in public without me realizing it. Old usernames, forgotten accounts, address leaks, tagged locations, pictures with landmarks in the background, everything. For a long time, every notification spike of my heart felt earned. A reinstall prompt on a laptop would make my hands go cold. A woman glancing at me twice in a store would ruin the rest of my day. Every unknown number felt personal. Every soft knock at night felt like a test I had already failed once. People think the aftermath of something like this is fear of the person. It is, obviously, but it's also fear of how ordinary the opening was. That's the part one still come back to. Nothing about that first date looked dramatic from the outside. I met a woman for drinks. I ignored my discomfort because I didn't want to be rude. I left my phone on a table for 1 minute. I came home and tried to return to normal. If you heard the beginning of my story without the ending, you'd probably tell me not to overthink it. I did overthink it, eventually. Just later than I should have. That's why I tell this now. Because people like her don't always break into your life with noise. Sometimes they step in through convenience, through politeness, through the part of you that wants to seem relaxed and reasonable. They count on you explaining away the early things. The strange question, the too specific comment, the feeling that something is wrong even when nothing has happened yet. Sometimes the worst part isn't the messages, or the photos, or even hearing someone inside your apartment at night. It's realizing how much of yourself can be taken before you understand that anything is being stolen. And once someone like that decides your life belongs partly to them, deleting an app does nothing. Blocking does nothing. Because people like that do not need access. They only need an opportunity. If your gut tells you something is wrong, listen to it. It may be the only voice in the room that still belongs entirely to you. Story number 7. The first thing that should have scared me was not the message he sent, or the photo outside my building, or even the page from my therapy journal that showed up in my inbox at 2 in the morning. It was the number, 99%. That was what the app gave us the night we matched, like it meant something sacred. Like the rest of the world had been rough drafts, and this one was the finished version. I remember staring at my phone in bed, the room dark except for the little blue light from my charger, thinking, that has to be fake. No one is 99% compatible with anyone. But I was 28, living alone in Columbus, Ohio, and I had just come out of a relationship that had lasted long enough to make me forget what it felt like to be interesting to somebody new. I worked in billing for a physical therapy clinic, which sounds exactly as thrilling as it was. My days were numbers, insurance claims, phone calls, fluorescent lights, microwaved lunches, and the same 20-minute drive home past the gas station, the car wash, and the diner with the broken red sign. My life was ordinary in a way that had once felt comforting. I had a small second-floor apartment over a nail salon. I kept my shoes lined up by the door. I bought the same oat milk every week. I watered the same dying plant every Sunday and acted surprised when it still looked bad. On Tuesdays I had therapy, and when I was too embarrassed to say certain things out loud to another person, I said them into my phone first. Little voice notes I never sent anybody. Half the time I deleted them right after. Sometimes I wrote drafts in my notes app and then erased those too. Things I did not want to become real by saying them to someone else. That part matters. I did not think any of that was a risk. I thought private meant private. The app was called Hearth. I had downloaded it because my coworker Nina would not stop talking about it. It's not like Tinder, she told me over lunch. It's supposed to be deeper, less random. It just added this compatibility thing. You answer questions, it learns your patterns, whatever, and then it gives you a score. Learns your patterns should have been enough to make me close the app right there. Instead, I made an account. I uploaded 5 normal pictures, answered a few prompts, and let it pull my Spotify because apparently people now needed to know if I listened to Phoebe Bridgers in order to date me. There were a bunch of permission requests, microphone access, contacts, motion data, calendar suggestions. I denied some, allowed some, skimmed a lot, like everyone does, like an idiot. For about a week, it was exactly what you would expect. Men holding fish. Men in group photos where you had to play a guessing game. Men whose bios said fluent in sarcasm. A few decent conversations that died after 2 days. Then one Thursday night after therapy, I was lying on my couch in sweatpants with takeout Thai food balanced on my stomach when my phone buzzed. New match, 99% compatible. His name was Evan. His profile was almost suspiciously normal. 31, product designer, lived in German village, liked old bookstores, running at night, black coffee, bad horror movies, and people who leave parties early without making a big scene. He had kind eyes, not movie star handsome, but open. Familiar somehow. The kind of face you feel like you have seen at a coffee shop and trusted for no reason. His first message said, "This is going to sound strange, but I think you're one of those people who act calm even when your mind is going 100 miles an hour." I actually laughed when I read it, because it was flattering in exactly the way that works on someone like me. Not too forward, not too generic. It felt observant. I wrote back, "That does sound strange." He replied almost immediately, "Sorry, let me try again. You seem like someone who keeps a lot to herself, then accidentally reveals something painfully honest at 1 a.m. That one hit harder. A week earlier I had recorded a voice note after midnight, sitting in my parked car outside my building, because I did not want to go upstairs and be alone with my own thoughts yet. I had said almost word for word, "I think I keep too much in and then I leak honesty at weird hours." Of course, that could still have been coincidence. It was the kind of thing a lot of people might say. That was how it started, small enough to ignore. I told myself the app was built to do this, to make you feel understood. That was the whole business model. It was probably trained on broad behavioral patterns, attachment styles, all the usual language people used in therapy and online dating. I was not special. I was not being singled out. I was just the target audience. So I kept talking to him. And if I am being honest, I did not just keep talking to him. I leaned in. He was easy in that dangerous kind of way. He never pushed too hard. He asked good questions. He remembered little things. When I told him I hated crowded bars because I never knew where to put my body, he said, "Same." There's always that first 10 minutes where you feel like you're pretending to be a person in a scene instead of just existing. When I told him I had a sister in Cincinnati and a mom who still mailed me newspaper clippings she thought I should read, he said, "Moms love sending physical proof that they were thinking about you. Mine sends recipes I never make." He knew when to joke, when to slow down, when to leave a little pause. He sent voice notes sometimes low and calm, and he had this way of trailing off at the end of sentences like he was thinking while he talked. It felt familiar too. Too familiar. 3 days in, he said, "I bet you're one of those people who does better with side-by-side conversation than eye contact." I sat up on my couch when I read that, because that was something my therapist had said to me, almost exactly, during our second session. And afterward I had written it down in my journal, because it had made me feel seen and slightly embarrassed at the same time. I stared at the message for a long time before replying, "Maybe." He sent back a smiley face, and I had a feeling. That night I called Nina. She was halfway through blow-drying her hair and yelled over the noise, "That sounds romantic, Claire." It doesn't sound a little weird? Everything is weird now. The app probably just has really good behavioral matching. Can behavioral matching know things I wrote in my journal? There was a pause. "Did you put journaling stuff in the app?" "No." "Then no. Probably not. Probably not." I should have listened to the way she said probably. A few nights later he asked me out. Just coffee Saturday afternoon, a place in Short North I liked. He picked it before I suggested anything. When I asked how he chose it, he said, "You seem like the kind of person who needs a place with soft lighting and an easy exit." that made me put my phone down and look at my apartment like there might be cameras in it. I had once written, in a draft I deleted right after, that I always chose restaurants based on exit visibility. I had never told anyone that, because it sounded ridiculous. Like I was admitting I walked through life half expecting to need to leave in a hurry. I almost canceled then. But he had not threatened me. He had not been crude. He had not crossed any obvious line. He just knew things. And there is a strange vanity in being known, even when it scares you. So I went. It was cold that Saturday, one of those gray Ohio afternoons that makes everything look a little unfinished. The sidewalks were wet from old snow. My windshield had a thin crust of ice around the edges. I wore jeans, boots, and a dark green sweater I always wore when I wanted to feel hidden and put together at the same time. When I got out of my car, I already had a message from him. Green was the right choice. I stopped walking. I looked around the street. There were people everywhere, a couple pushing a stroller, two girls taking pictures near a mural, a guy walking a dog in a puffer jacket. Nothing obviously wrong. Then I saw him through the coffee shop window, sitting near the front, phone in his hand. I went inside with my heart doing that awful little sprint it does when your instincts arrive before your logic. He stood up and smiled like he had done nothing wrong. "You found me," he said. "That text was creepy." He blinked, then laughed softly. "I meant the sweater suits you. Bad timing. I should have left. I know that now." Instead, I stayed for 40 minutes. He was exactly like his messages, which somehow made it worse. Calm, warm, thoughtful, almost unnervingly attentive. He remembered my coffee order from one offhand mention in chat. He asked about my job in a way that made it sound more interesting than it was. He noticed I kept my hands around the cup even after it cooled down and said, "You do that when you're trying to ground yourself, right?" I said, "Do I?" He smiled. I noticed. At one point, he mentioned a children's book I used to love, The Secret Garden. Not because it was in a photo, not because I had listed it anywhere, but because he said, "You seem like a secret garden kid. Quiet on the outside, inner life doing all the heavy lifting." My stomach dropped, so suddenly I barely heard the rest of what he was saying. I had talked about that exact book in therapy the week before. I had told my therapist it was the first story that made me feel less lonely as a kid. It was not online. It was not on any social profile. It was a private memory, attached to my grandmother reading to me in a recliner that smelled like face powder and peppermint. I interrupted him. "How do you know that?" He tilted his head. "Know what?" "That book." He shrugged. "Lucky guess." I looked at him for a long second, and something in his face changed. Not into anything openly sinister, just something watchful, like he was measuring whether he had gone too far. I made an excuse about needing to meet a friend, and left with half my coffee still sitting there. He texted before I even got to my car. "I'm sorry if I came on too strong." Then, "You pull away when you feel understood. I think it makes you suspicious." Then, "That wasn't meant to scare you." I got in my car and locked the doors before replying. "What exactly is this app using?" He took a little longer that time. More than people realize. I never answered. At home I opened Hearth and went straight to settings. The permission page was a mess of vague language. Personalized experiences, behavioral optimization, reflective data integration, improved match resonance. Most of it sounded like it had been written by lawyers and marketers in the same room. There was also a section I had never really noticed before because it had been folded into a long setup screen. Allow Hearth to enhance compatibility by analyzing imported self-reflective content from connected services and device-level language patterns. Connected services. I checked what was connected. Google Drive, microphone, photos, health data, notes access limited, keyboard learning. I felt physically cold reading it. I do not remember granting half of that, but maybe I had. Maybe it had been hidden inside some bright little continue button while I was distracted or tired or lonely. Maybe I had given pieces of myself away, one convenient permission at a time. I revoked everything I could. Then I deleted the app. I wish that had been the end. Instead, an hour later, I got an email from Evan. Not through the app. to my personal email. Subject line, I really am sorry. The message said, I know that phrase bothered you, the one about being understood. I just want you to know I'm not trying to use your own words against you. My own words. He had typed it like a confession wrapped inside an apology. At the bottom was a screenshot. Just a small one. Blurry cropped. But it was enough. It was a note from my phone. A deleted draft. One I had written after my breakup. One sentence highlighted in pale yellow. I want someone who knows where I go in my head when I get quiet and stays gentle there. I did not scream or cry or throw up, which is what people imagine they would do. I just sat on the edge of my bed with that numb, buzzing feeling behind my eyes, like my body had stepped back and left me alone with the problem. Then I called the police. The officer who came out was polite, tired, and clearly dealing with something he did not fully understand. He looked at the email, wrote things down, and asked if Evan had threatened me directly. No. Has he shown up at your home? Not yet. Do you know his full name? No. Just what's on the app. He nodded in that frustrating way people do when they are already putting your situation in the category of unpleasant, but not actionable. He told me to document everything, change passwords, and contact the app company. When he left, I pushed a chair under my front doorknob, even though I knew that would not stop anyone serious. I did not sleep that night. The next few days were a blur of admin panic. New passwords, two-factor authentication, device resets, support tickets. Hearth sent me an automatic reply first, then a more polished human-sounding email that thanked me for my concern and assured me user safety was their highest priority. They said they took unauthorized contact very seriously. They asked for screenshots. I sent everything. Evan kept writing. Not constantly, which would have almost been easier. Instead it came in little drops, carefully spaced, like he knew too much pressure would make me vanish completely. I think you're making this darker than it is. You wanted honesty. You share more than you think. And then the one that made my hands shake so badly I dropped my phone. Tuesday, 7:40 p.m. You said into your phone that sometimes you wish someone could be built exactly for you. Wasn't that the point? That was not a general truth. That was from a voice note I had made after therapy while driving home in traffic. I had deleted it in the parking lot before I even went upstairs. I forwarded it to Hearth. No response. I sent it to Nina, and she called me within 30 seconds. Claire, get out of your apartment. What? I'm serious. Go to my place or your sister's or a hotel. I don't care. If he has your email and your notes and your voice memos, stop assuming this is just online. So I packed a bag and drove to Nina's condo across town. At first that helped. I was embarrassed, but helped. She made boxed mac and cheese at 11 at night and kept pretending things were normal, which was kind. I slept on her couch with the TV on low and her cat staring at me like I was an inconvenience. The next morning, on my way out to my car, I found a padded envelope tucked under one windshield wiper. Inside was a copy of The Secret Garden. Not a random one. The same old green paperback edition my grandmother used to read to me. Out of print, with the little gold key on the cover. There was no note except a receipt from a used bookstore and one line written on the back in small, neat letters. You said it made you feel less alone. I had never told Evan where I parked. That was the moment the fear changed shape. Up to then it had still lived partly in my phone, in screens and permissions and badly worded emails. Now it was in the same physical world as my body. The parking lot, the windshield, the cold morning air, my actual hands touching the thing he had chosen for me from a memory he had stolen. Nina drove me back to the station herself. This time I got a detective, a woman named Alvarez who looked like she had not been impressed in years. She asked sharper questions. She took the book in an evidence bag. She said the phrase, unauthorized access, and did not sound confused when I described the app permissions. Do not engage with him, she said. Do not meet him. Save everything. We'll subpoena what we can. What can you do now? She hesitated, which told me the answer before she said it. Not enough yet. I went to my sister Mara's house in Cincinnati that night. She was older than me by 5 years, married, 2 kids, practical in a way that can feel cold until you need it. She changed all the passwords on the Wi-Fi, turned off the smart speaker in the kitchen, made me put tape over my laptop camera, and said, "You're not crazy. You're late. That's different." I stayed in her guest room with a duffel bag on the floor, and my shoes lined up by the bed, like I was trying to create order out of something that had already slipped past that. For 2 days, nothing happened. No emails, no texts, no unknown numbers. Harth finally wrote back with a statement so polished it made me want to put my fist through a wall. They said they had found no evidence of internal misconduct and suggested I review my privacy settings across third-party services. Like maybe this was my fault for having a mind that had been stored somewhere. I almost started believing I had overreacted, that maybe he was scared now. Maybe police contact had pushed him back. Maybe the silence meant done. On the third night, Mara and I went to Target after the kids were asleep because I needed underwear and a charger and something to do besides sit in borrowed safety. We parked under one of those overly bright lot lamps that makes everything look flat and exposed. As we were walking in, my phone buzzed. New email. No subject line. Inside was a photo of me and Mara from behind, crossing the parking lot, taken less than a minute earlier. Under it, one sentence. You always feel safer when someone else drives. I could not breathe for a second. Mara took my phone from my hand, looked at the screen, and turned so fast I thought she might actually spot him. But of course that is not how it works. Predators are almost never standing in the obvious place, smiling under a streetlight. They are in the car 3 rows over, or behind the glass, or already gone. We got back in the car. Mara locked the doors and called 911 while I watched every moving shape in that parking lot like it might split open and become him. Police came, took another report, checked cameras. Nothing immediate. Maybe a gray sedan leaving too fast. Maybe not. Every answer was made of maybe. That was the worst part. Maybe is such a useless word when you are scared. Detective Alvarez called the next day. Her voice had changed. We identified the man from the profile, she said. That is not his real first name. He works for a contractor that handles user engagement systems for Harth. I sat down on the edge of Mara's bathtub because my knees had gone weak. What does that mean? It means he had access he should not have had. It also means the company is suddenly very interested in cooperating. Did he do this to other people? A pause. We're still sorting that out. That answer still wakes me up sometimes. Later that afternoon, Harth sent a new email, this one legal and careful. They called it a data incident. They said a third-party employee had improperly accessed user reflective inputs and derivative personality modeling tools. They apologized for any distress caused. Any distress caused. There are phrases that tell you exactly how little human blood is inside a company. Detective Alvarez told me they had a warrant for his apartment and office. She told me not to leave the house alone yet. I was sitting at Mara's kitchen table that evening, trying to drink tea I could not taste, when the motion light in the backyard clicked on. It was automatic, bright enough to flood the whole little fenced patch of winter grass. Mara looked up first. Then I did. He was standing at the back gate, not trying to get in, not knocking, not calling out. Just standing there with one hand on the latch, face tilted slightly toward the house, like he was waiting for one of us to invite him in. I knew it was him immediately, even in the harsh light, even through the glass. The same coat from the coffee shop, same stillness, same expression, almost gentle, which somehow made it worse. My whole body went cold and hot at the same time. Mara whispered, "Get upstairs." I could not move. He lifted his phone. Mine rang on the table. Blocked number. Mara answered before I could stop her. "What do you want?" His voice came through tinny and calm. "I just want Claire to understand that none of this was random." Mara said, "Police are on the way." "I know," he said. Then he added, "Tell her I only used the parts she wanted someone to see." That sentence did something permanent to me. Because that is what violation really is, I think. Not just taking what is private. Deciding you understand it better than the person it belongs to. Deciding access is the same thing as intimacy. Mara hung up and started locking things that were already locked. I stood there staring at him through the glass until the distant sound of sirens grew loud enough that he finally stepped back. Not rushed, not panicked, just disappointed. Then he walked into the dark beyond the fence and disappeared. Police searched the neighborhood. They found his car 2 streets over. They found him later that night in it, parked behind a closed church, with a laptop, 3 phones, printed screenshots of my notes, and a folder with my name on it. I wish I could tell you that was satisfying. It was not. There was no relief big enough to match what had already happened. No clean ending. He was charged, yes. Stalking, unauthorized computer access, harassment, a few others. His lawyer said he was mentally unwell. Harth said he had acted alone. There were hearings, statements, delays. I learned words I never wanted to know. Chain of custody, metadata, discovery. I also learned that when something private is taken from you, people keep acting like the danger ends once the person is caught. It does not. I moved apartments. Then 6 months later, I moved again. I stopped making voice notes for a long time. I stopped journaling on my phone. I went back to paper, then hated paper too because it felt too easy to steal. I still keep my curtains closed at night. I still check parking lots before I get out of my car. I still read every permission request now like it is a threat in plain English. Sometimes I think the scariest part was not him. It was how easily the rest of it existed around him. The systems, the wording, the convenience, the way loneliness is such a profitable thing to measure, study, and sell back to people wearing a softer face. I do not use dating apps anymore. That is not me giving advice, exactly. Plenty of people use them and end up fine. Maybe most do. Maybe this was one man, one company, one terrible set of decisions. That is what people say when they want to seal a story off from themselves. But every now and then I will download a totally unrelated app, something for groceries or flights or meditation, and a little box pops up asking for access to my microphone, my contacts, my motion, my files, my behavior, my preferences, my experience. And I think of that number, 99%. A score so flattering, I almost mistook it for fate. Sometimes the scariest part is not that someone wants to get close to you. It is how many doors are already open before they even knock. Story number 8. Have you ever heard a dead person's voice so clearly that your body reacted before your mind had time to argue with it? I don't mean a memory or one of those moments where a song or a smell pulls somebody back into the room for a second. I mean really heard it through a phone speaker in the middle of the night with the same rhythm, the same little pauses, the same softness they used when they were trying not to wake anyone else up. Because I have, and I need you to understand something before I tell you the rest. By the time my sister heard it and went pale, I was already in too deep. That was the worst part. Not just that someone was using my mother's voice, but that I had started looking forward to it. My name's Daniel. I was 28 when this happened, and I was living alone in a 1-bedroom apartment outside Columbus, in one of those buildings that tries hard to look modern from the outside and still smells faintly like old carpet and microwave dinners in the hallway. I worked from home for an insurance company, mostly claims processing, mostly staring at 2 screens all day while people explained small disasters in tired voices. Fender benders, roof leaks, stolen catalytic converters, broken windows. Normal life, just chipped around the edges. My life was quiet back then, almost aggressively ordinary. I woke up at the same time every day, made coffee that was never quite strong enough, answered emails, reheated leftovers, went to the same grocery store, came home, watched whatever mindless thing an app put in front of me, and went to bed too late. I'd had a bad breakup about a year earlier. Nothing dramatic, just one of those relationships that fades until both people are basically waiting for the other one to say it first. My younger sister, Lena, lived about 20 minutes away with her fiancé. She worked at a dental office, called me more than I called her, and still had the same habit she'd had since we were kids of knocking once and walking in like all doors were suggestions. We'd lost our mom 6 years earlier. Ovarian cancer, fast at the end, brutal in a quiet way. Our dad had already been out of the picture for years by then, So after Mom died, it was mostly just Lena and me trying to act like adults before either of us really felt like one. The reason I'm telling you that is because grief doesn't really leave. It just learns how to sit still. Most days it was background noise, a date on the calendar, a smell in a store, a voicemail I couldn't bring myself to delete. It wasn't something I walked around actively drowning in. Life felt safe enough, boring enough, manageable enough. Then I downloaded a dating app again. I know that sounds stupidly simple, like the kind of decision that should not be allowed to change anything serious, but that's how a lot of bad things start. Nothing cinematic, just a bored Thursday night, rain ticking against the bedroom window, half a beer on the nightstand, and that dumb little swipe motion with your thumb. Her profile said her name was Nora. 26, dark hair, lived nearby, liked old horror movies and late-night drives and voice notes more than texting because, as her bio put it, people sound more honest when they're tired. I remember thinking that line was trying a little too hard, but in a way I liked. Her pictures looked normal. Not influencer polished, not model-level perfect, just pretty in a low-key way. Hoodies, car selfies, one blurry photo at what looked like a bowling alley. She had this half smile in most of them, like somebody who wasn't quite comfortable with being photographed. We matched around midnight. The first few messages were normal enough. Where do you live? What do you do? Have you actually seen that movie, or are you pretending to look interesting? She was funny, dry, a little weird, quick without sounding rehearsed. Then after maybe 15 minutes, she said, "I'm gonna send you a voice note because I hate typing when I'm tired." A second later, my phone lit up. I still remember the first time I heard her voice. It was soft, low, a little breathy, like she was talking from under a blanket, so she wouldn't wake someone up in the next room. Not sexy in some obvious fake way. Just close. Intimate. Like she already knew me a little. "Hey," she said. "Please ignore how awful I sound right now. It's late, I have a headache, and my thumbs are officially done for the day. Also, I swear I'm nicer than my typing makes me seem." I smiled. That's the embarrassing part. I smiled like an idiot at a phone screen in a dark room because hearing a real voice, instead of reading another flat little bubble of text, felt weirdly personal. I sent one back. That became the pattern almost immediately. We'd message a little during the day, but mostly she came alive after midnight. She said she hated video calls. Said they made her feel trapped, watched. She never wanted to talk live either, only voice notes, and only when it was late. At first that should have been a red flag, but she had an explanation for everything. She had bad anxiety. She had a roommate who slept lightly. She liked having a minute to think before speaking. Honestly, those all sounded believable to me. And if you've ever been lonely in a very adult, very functional way, you know how easy it is to treat small strangeness like personality. The notes got longer. A minute, then 3 minutes, then 7. We talked about everything, or at least it felt like everything. Her job, supposedly remote transcription work for a legal company. My job, which she made fun of gently because I sounded 40 when I talked about insurance deductibles. What foods we hated. Places we wanted to move. Why she couldn't sleep. Why I never really dated anyone seriously after my breakup. She was good at silence too, which I know sounds odd, but it mattered. She'd leave these small pauses in her voice notes that made it feel like she was sitting next to me, thinking. Sometimes she'd laugh very softly before saying something honest. Sometimes she'd whisper if it was especially late, and I started catching myself lowering my own voice when I replied, even though I lived alone. After about a week, I got used to listening to her in bed with the lights off. That was the first problem. The second was how quickly she figured me out. She remembered everything. Tiny things. That I hated the sound of forks scraping plates. That I always wore mismatched socks in the apartment because I never bothered pairing them after laundry. That my coffee maker made this weird choking sound before it finished brewing. I never thought much about it because, technically, I had told her those things. But she could take some dumb detail I'd mentioned once and turn it into something warm and specific. One night she sent, "You sound tired in a way that's more than work tired. You sound like the kind of tired people get when they haven't really been looked after in a while." I listened to that one twice. Another time she said, "You always answer faster after midnight." I think daytime Daniel is careful, but nighttime Daniel wants to be known. It sounds manipulative now. At the time it felt like being seen. There were a few moments early on that bothered me, but each one was small enough to explain away. The first was when she mentioned the wind chime outside my kitchen window. I had sent her a short voice note while rinsing dishes, and in her reply she laughed and said, "That wind chime is driving me insane, by the way. It sounds like one sad spoon hitting another sad spoon." I paused the note and stood there at my sink. The wind chime had belonged to my mom. It was cheap silver, kind of out of place on my apartment window because it looked more like something that belonged on a back porch, but Lena had found it in a box after Mom died and made me take it. I never mentioned it to anyone because I barely noticed it anymore. Then I replayed my own voice note, and sure enough, if you listened carefully, you could hear it faintly in the background. So I told myself that was all it was. Another time she said, "You should close your blinds earlier. You can see right into your living room from outside." That one made me sit up. I texted back, "How do you know where I live?" She sent a note almost immediately, amused, calm. "Daniel, relax. You told me you were in Hilliard, and you once described your apartment building as the one near the gas station with the busted sign. There are like 4 of those. I'm joking." I remember laughing a little after that, but not because it was funny. More because I felt stupid for sounding paranoid. It kept happening like that. A little unease, then a plausible answer, then me feeling dramatic. A couple nights later, she used a phrase my mother used to say when Lena and I were kids. Just a small one. "Go get some sleep, baby," she said at the end of a note, soft and absent-minded, like it had slipped out naturally. "Everything feels worse after 1 in the morning." My mom used to say that all the time. Everything feels worse after 1 in the morning. Word for word. I stared at my phone after that. But then again, it wasn't some incredibly unique sentence. Lots of moms probably say things like that. Lots of people say things like that. I told myself grief makes patterns out of dust. I didn't tell Lena about Nora until maybe 2 weeks in. That was normal for me. I'm private, and I hate doing that thing where you mention someone too early, and then it turns into a whole family update before anything is real. Lena came by on a Sunday afternoon to drop off a casserole she had made too much of, which is how older siblings and younger siblings trick each other into checking in. It was gray outside, that flat winter light that makes everything look tired. She kicked off her shoes, walked into my kitchen, and started reorganizing things without asking. "Are you eating actual meals?" she asked. "I'm literally holding your casserole." That wasn't a yes. I was in a decent mood. I'd had a voice note from Nora the night before that lasted almost 9 minutes. She had talked about her childhood bedroom, how she used to sit on the floor and listen to rain in the gutters when she couldn't sleep. Something about it had hit me harder than it should have. Maybe because it sounded real. Maybe because I missed hearing a woman's voice in my life that wasn't a customer explaining water damage. So I told Lena casually, "I've been talking to someone." She turned immediately. "Excuse me? Don't make it weird." "I'm making it exactly as weird as it deserves." "Who is she?" I told her the basics. Her name, supposedly. That we'd matched online. That she hated video and mostly sent voice notes. Lena made a face. That is either artsy and charming or the start of a Dateline episode. "Thank you for your support." She grinned. "Let me hear her." I should have said no. I don't know why, but even then a part of me didn't want anyone else touching whatever strange little world had formed between me and this voice. But I pulled up the app anyway and scrolled to one of the shorter notes. It was one from the night before. "Hey," Nora said through my phone speaker, gentle, almost smiling. "I know this is random, but I passed a laundromat tonight and it smelled like that detergent our parents used when we were kids, and it made me think of the safest sleep I ever had. Isn't that weird, the way your body remembers things before your brain does?" Lena's whole face changed. Not dramatically at first, just this tiny freezing, like something inside her had hit a wall. Then the color went out of her cheeks. "Play that again," she said. I laughed because I thought she was being dramatic. "What?" "Daniel, play it again." So I did. She listened harder the second time, eyes fixed on the phone like it might suddenly explain itself. When the note ended, she looked at me and said very quietly, "Where did you get that?" "It's Nora. I told you." "That's Mom." I actually felt annoyed for a second. "Lena, I'm serious." "No, you're not." That's Mom's voice. I stood there holding the phone, and I remember feeling this weird split inside me. One part wanted to argue, because the idea was ridiculous. The other part, the part that had been collecting those small wrong feelings for 2 weeks, had already gone cold. "It's not," I said, but I said it weaker. Lena stepped closer. The way she said, "Hey." The little breath before the second sentence. "Daniel, that is Mom." Or someone doing Mom. I didn't know what to say. She started crying before I did. Not sobbing, nothing huge, just instant tears, which honestly scared me more. Lena doesn't cry easily. She sat down at my kitchen table and covered her mouth with one hand. I replayed the note again, this time listening like my life depended on it. And that's when I heard it. Not just the tone, but the shape of it, the cadence, the way she softened the end of certain words. There was a kind of warmth in my mother's voice that I had forgotten on purpose because remembering it too clearly hurt too much. Hearing it come out of a stranger's message at 2 in the afternoon was like having a dead nerve suddenly light up. Lena asked, "Do you have any of the old videos on your laptop?" I did. Not many. After Mom died, Lena had digitized some camcorder tapes and a few voicemails and put them in a shared cloud folder, so we'd both have them. I hadn't opened that folder in months. We sat at my kitchen table and listened. A birthday video from when I was 11. Mom laughing in the background because I was pretending not to like the cake. A Christmas clip where she told Lena not to shake the boxes because it ruins the whole point, baby. An old voicemail from when I was in college saying, "Hey, sweetheart, call me when you wake up. No rush." By the third clip, there was no room left for denial. It wasn't identical in the way an impression is identical. It was cleaner than that, smoother, almost too smooth. But it was her. The same building blocks, rearranged into new sentences. I messaged Nora right there in front of Lena. "Who are you?" No answer. I sent another. "If this is some kind of joke, it's not funny." The typing bubble appeared, then disappeared. A minute later, a new voice note came in. I did not want to hit play. Lena shook her head once, like maybe we shouldn't. But curiosity is its own kind of trap, and I pressed it. The voice that came out was still soft, still intimate, and now it felt rotten. "You weren't supposed to play me for anyone else," she said. "That was private." Lena stood up so fast her chair scraped the floor. My skin went hot. "What the hell is this?" Another bubble appeared. Then another note. "You liked me better before you started asking practical questions." I called through the app. Declined immediately. Called again. Declined. Then the profile vanished. "Just gone." Lena looked at me and said, "You need to call the police." I did, and I wish I could tell you that was the moment adults arrived and handled everything, but that's not how it went. An officer came by that evening, young, polite, clearly trying to take it seriously, while also not really knowing what box to put it in. He listened to a couple of the notes. He looked at the profile screenshots I had taken. He asked if money had been requested, or explicit photos or threats. No, not yet. He nodded a lot. "It could be someone catfishing," he said. "Could be an ex, someone who knows you, someone messing with audio software. You should change your passwords, report the account, and document anything else you get." "That's it," Lena said. He gave her the kind of tired look people in authority give when they're about to say something technically reasonable and emotionally useless. "Right now there's not much we can act on unless it escalates." Escalates. That word sat in my apartment like a bad smell after he left. Lena wanted me to come stay with her and her fiancé. I told her I'd be fine for one night, mostly because I was still embarrassed. I know that sounds insane now, but humiliation was a huge part of it. I had let a stranger talk to me in my room every night for weeks. I had told this voice things. Not my bank information or anything obviously stupid, but enough. Enough for someone to understand where the soft parts were. That night I changed everything. Email passwords, cloud passwords, app passwords, even the stupid streaming services. I turned on two-factor authentication, logged out all other devices, reported the dating profile, and tried to convince myself the worst part was over. At 12:43 a.m., my phone buzzed. Not the dating app. A text from an unknown number. Check your email security settings more carefully. My mouth went dry. A second text came in. You missed one. I opened my email. There was a recent login from a Windows device I didn't recognize, from my own city, less than an hour earlier. Then my phone buzzed again. A voice note, sent as an attachment through text. I just stared at it. I didn't open it. I called Lena instead. She answered sleepy and scared immediately. I could hear her fiancé asking what was wrong in the background. I got another one, I said. Don't listen to it. I listened to it anyway after we hung up. That was my mistake. Or maybe there were too many mistakes by then to count. Daniel, the voice said, barely above a whisper, you should really stop leaving the chain loose on your door. It makes me nervous. I froze. I looked at my front door from the couch. The chain was hanging. I almost never used it because the lock itself worked fine, but she was right, it was loose. Not broken, just hanging where I hadn't slid it into place. I got up and checked the peephole. No one there. I barely slept that night. From there it came in waves. The next morning I found that someone had tried to reset the password on an old cloud storage account Lena and I used years earlier. The one with the family videos. The recovery email was mine. Whoever had been inside my accounts had gone digging. At work I couldn't focus. Every phone notification made my chest tighten. Around lunch I got a call from my apartment office saying a woman had come by asking whether I still lived in Unit 3B because she had a package for an old friend. They hadn't let her up because she wasn't on any approved visitor list. Did you get a name? I asked. The manager hesitated. She said Nora, or Laura, something like that. I left work mode completely after that. Closed the laptop, called the police again, filed another report, got the same basic response with a little more concern in the officer's voice this time. Document everything. Save everything. Call immediately if anyone appears in person. Lena made me come to her place that night. Her fiancé, Grant, tried to be helpful in that practical guy way. He set up cameras on their porch, checked the locks twice, made bad jokes because silence was worse. Lena sat beside me on the couch while I scrolled through all the old screenshots and notes, looking for something I had missed. That's when I noticed the profile photos. I should have caught it earlier, but fear makes you stupid and hindsight makes everyone a genius. In one of the screenshots, Nora had a tiny scar above her left eyebrow. In another, the scar was gone. The earrings changed from one mirror selfie to another, but the reflection behind her was the same. Same towel hook, same toothpaste on the counter, same streak on the mirror. Different outfits, same image set dressed up to look new. Fake. Obvious fake. Grant reverse searched one of the photos and found the real woman in less than 10 minutes. A lifestyle blogger from Arizona. Married. Hundreds of thousands of followers. Her face had been stolen cleanly. Lena looked sick. It's not even a woman, she said. Maybe. Maybe not. That uncertainty was almost worse. For 2 days nothing happened. That should have been a relief. Instead it felt like standing in a dark room after hearing something move. Then Thursday night, while I was back at my apartment with Grant helping me gather clothes and some important documents, we found the envelope. It was taped under the lip of the mailboxes in the front entry, where you wouldn't notice it unless you bent down. My name was written on the front in neat block letters. Inside was a cheap pair of wired earbuds and a folded note. For privacy, Grant said, don't touch anything else. I already had. We called the police. They took the note, bagged the earbuds, dusted for prints, told us not to expect much. No camera in the entry. No witnesses. The usual. That night, after I went back to Lena's place, a new text came in from another unknown number. The note is because I hate when people listen with other people around. Then another. You ruin things when you make them public. I blocked the number. 10 minutes later, an email arrived from an address that was just a random string of numbers and letters. Listen alone. There was another audio file attached. I wish I could say I didn't open it this time. I did. Alone in Lena's guest room, sitting on the edge of the bed with the lights on. It started with breathing. Just a few seconds of soft room sound. Then my mother's voice said, "Danny, don't ignore people just because they scare you. That's rude." Danny. My mother was the only person who called me that after I turned about 12. Lena stopped when we were kids because I hated it from anyone else. I walked straight out of the room and threw up in Lena's bathroom. After that, the fear changed shape. Up until then it had been invasive, humiliating, creepy. Now it felt targeted, deliberate. Someone wasn't just messing around with software. Someone had studied us. My family. My dead mother. The exact lever to pull. The detective I spoke to the next day, a woman named Russo, was the first person who made me feel like I wasn't crazy. She didn't promise miracles. She didn't give me that rehearsed calm voice. She just listened. When I played the audio for her in a small interview room, she said, "That's a voice clone." Hearing someone name it helped, and somehow made it worse. How much audio do they need? I asked. Depends on the tool, but not as much as people think. Can you find who did it? We'll subpoena what we can from the app and your service providers. But burner accounts and public Wi-Fi make this slow. Do you know anyone who would want to get close to you this way? I almost laughed. That was the problem. Whoever it was didn't need to hate me. They just needed access, patience, and a working knowledge of how to pull a person apart. Russo asked if I had posted family videos online anywhere, old memorial pages, shared drives, social accounts. The answer was yes, maybe not intentionally, not publicly as far as I knew. She said even private material can leak if one password gets compromised. Then she said something I still think about. People think stalking is about romance. Most of the time it's about control. Romance is just the costume. I went back to my apartment that Saturday because I was tired of living out of a duffel bag and tired of feeling chased out of my own life. Grant was supposed to come later, after dinner, and help me change the lock. It was cold, windy, one of those March nights where the air smells like wet pavement and old leaves. I got there around 7. Everything looked normal. Too normal. My couch, my dishes, my stupid wind chime tapping softly in the kitchen window. I kept all the lights on. For a few hours nothing happened. I folded clothes. I boxed up papers. I avoided every quiet corner in the apartment like it might say something back. At 10:18 p.m. a voice note hit my phone. Unknown number again. I didn't play it. At 10:19 another. At 10:20 a text. "You're home." I took a picture of the message and sent it to Detective Russo. At 10:23 another text. "Second floor window, lamp on, blue shirt. You always pace when you're scared." My hands started shaking so badly, I dropped the phone on the couch. I killed the living room lamp and crouched below the window without thinking. That's the kind of fear I mean. Not movie fear. Animal fear. Your body moving first. Grant was 10 minutes away. Russo texted back and told me to call 911 immediately if I saw anyone at the building. Then at 10:27, someone knocked on my apartment door. Not hard, not urgent, just 3 small, patient knocks. I don't know how long I stood there staring at the door. Long enough for another text. "Don't be rude, Danny." Then I heard it. Not through the phone this time. Through the wood. My mother's voice, soft and close, from the hallway outside my apartment. "Baby, open the door. It's cold out here." Every part of me stopped. I know what some people will think. That obviously I should have run, called the cops, done anything except go near the door. And you're right. But when your dead mother's voice comes through a barrier you thought separated you from the world, logic gets delayed. Grief and terror do something weird together. They make you hope and panic at the same time. I took one step toward the door before my brain caught up. Then the doorknob turned. Slowly. Once to the right, then back. The person outside knew it was locked. I stumbled backward, grabbed my phone, and called 911. I was talking too fast, whispering and choking on words. The dispatcher kept telling me to stay inside, stay away from the door, units were on the way. The voice outside came again, a little sweeter now. "Danny, it's okay. I just want to talk." Then a soft laugh. Not my mother's laugh. Too flat, too practiced. The doorknob jerked hard. I ran to the bathroom and locked myself in. Dumb move maybe, but it was the only room without a window, and it had a solid door. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. The dispatcher was still on the line. I kept saying, "Someone's here, like that was useful. From somewhere in the apartment, I heard my phone buzz with another incoming message. Then I heard something that made my stomach drop even lower. A small speaker sound, tinny amplified. The voice started again, but not at the door this time. It was moving, like whoever was outside had placed a device somewhere in the hall. "Everything feels worse after 1 in the morning, my mother's voice said. Then, after a pause, "You know that, sweetheart." I started crying then, quietly, angrily, because fear had crossed over into something humiliating and personal and unbearable. I was crying in my own bathroom while someone played my dead mother like a sound effect outside. A man in the apartment across the hall yelled, "Hey, what the hell are you doing?" There was sudden movement, footsteps pounding away, something plastic clattering against the wall. Then more voices, louder, real ones this time, and finally the police. When they came in, I was still in the bathroom with my back against the tub, phone in one hand, a can of shaving cream in the other, because apparently at some point I had decided that was a weapon. The officers cleared the apartment and hallway. Nobody there, but they found things. A small Bluetooth speaker shoved behind the fire extinguisher cabinet near my door. Fresh pry marks around the building's side entrance downstairs. And in the stairwell, half hidden behind a radiator pipe, a black knit cap, a cheap blonde wig, and a burner phone with the screen cracked. The phone had no contacts saved, but it had dozens of audio files. Some were named with dates. Some were named with fragments. Mom_hello. Mom_go to sleep. Mom_Danny. Mom_chain. Laundromat_safe_sleep. There were also photos of me carrying groceries, of me at my desk through the gap in my blinds, of Lena getting into her car outside her townhouse, of my apartment door, of the window above my kitchen sink. Whoever it was had been close, over and over, for longer than I knew. Security footage from a neighboring building caught someone leaving through the alley behind my complex a minute after the neighbor yelled. Dark hoodie, jeans, average height, face covered. Could have been a man. Could have been a woman. They got into a gray sedan with stolen plates and were gone before officers reached the lot. That was the last direct contact. No more voice notes. No more texts. No more emails. Detective Russo later told me the burner phone had connected several times to public Wi-Fi near a coffee shop less than a mile from my apartment. It also had traces of cloud storage access and audio editing apps, but nothing clean enough to pin to a real identity. The dating account had been created with stolen photos, a temporary email, and a prepaid number purchased with cash. Whoever did it knew enough to stay blurry. They never officially found the person. There were possibilities. A maintenance worker who had quit suddenly 2 weeks before. A guy who had asked the apartment office weird questions and never came back. A woman at the coffee shop who remembered somebody sitting for hours in a corner booth wearing headphones and speaking softly into a phone. None of it turned into anything solid. And that's the part people always want cleaned up when I tell them this. They want the name, the motive, the face. The little scene at the end where the detective slides a file across the table and explains the whole thing. But real life doesn't care what would make the story feel complete. Here's what I do know. Someone got into an old cloud account that held family videos and voicemails. Someone used that material to build a version of my mother's voice. Someone studied me long enough to know what would make me trust them, and later, what would make me break. And someone was willing to stand outside my door at night and speak in the voice of a dead woman to see if I would unlock my own home. I moved 3 months later. Not far, just far enough that I no longer knew the sound of every door in the hallway. I changed my number. I stopped using dating apps. I covered my laptop camera even when it wasn't on. I got in the habit of checking reflections in store windows behind me. I started setting the chain every night, then checking it twice, then taking a picture sometimes because memory and fear don't get along very well. Lena and I got closer after it happened, maybe because we had to. For a while, neither of us could listen to old recordings of Mom. It felt contaminated, like somebody had broken into a grave we carried privately and left fingerprints all over it. That might be the thing I hate most. Not just what I went through, but what it changed afterward. My mother's real voice used to be one of the safest sounds I knew. Now when I hear even a trace of it in my head, there's always a second where my stomach tightens first. People talk a lot now about deepfakes and stolen data and privacy, like it's all abstract, like it lives in headlines and policy arguments and tech podcasts. Maybe it does for most people. For me, it became something much smaller and uglier. A dark room, a locked bathroom, a speaker in a hallway, the sound of my dead mother asking to be let in. Sometimes the scariest part is not that someone can watch you. It's that they can listen long enough to learn what love sounded like in your house, then wear it better than a mask. So if something feels wrong, even if it arrives softly, even if it sounds familiar, even if part of you wants it to be real, listen to the part of yourself that goes cold. Because people like that do not need a reason. They just need your attention and one unlocked door. Story number 9. Have you ever opened your phone and found proof of a night you don't remember? I don't mean the normal kind of regret, a blurry selfie, a bad text, a charge from a food place you barely remember ordering from. I mean the kind of proof that makes your stomach drop so fast it feels like you missed a step on the stairs. Photos of a place you have never seen. A timestamp from after 2 in the morning when you are certain you were home in bed. Mud on your shoes. Bruises on your arms. Sent messages in your own name that don't sound like you. That happened to me 6 times before I finally understood that whatever was happening to me always began the same way. It began after dessert. My name is Claire. I was 29 when this happened, and at the time I lived alone in Columbus, in a 3rd-floor apartment over a dry cleaner and a nail salon on a street that always smelled faintly like detergent and car exhaust. I worked as a copywriter for a medical supply company, which sounds more interesting than it was. Most of my days were spreadsheets, product pages, and trying to make surgical gloves sound exciting to hospital procurement teams. My life was ordinary in the kind of way you stop noticing until something terrible cuts through it. I got up at 6:30. I bought coffee from the same corner place where the guy at the register had my order memorized. I walked to work unless it was raining. I called my younger sister Emily every Sunday. I watched too much true crime and told myself I was a cautious person because of it. My apartment had 2 locks on the door, a cheap ring light in the living room from a failed attempt at starting a skincare account, and a row of houseplants I kept forgetting to water. About 8 months before all of this, I had gotten out of a relationship that didn't end dramatically enough to feel tragic, but still left me feeling stupid and older than I was. So eventually I did what everyone does now. I downloaded dating apps. I swiped during lunch breaks. I had normal first dates with men who worked in finance, software, architecture, one who repaired elevators, one who taught high school history, and somehow made that sound boring. The strange thing was the dates were good. Not amazing, not movie perfect, but good in a very real way. Easy conversation. Shared jokes. The kind of eye contact that makes you think maybe this person is actually listening. More than once a man told me, right there at the table, that he wanted to see me again. And then they never texted. At first I blamed modern dating, because what else do you blame? People disappear. They change their minds. They get back with exes. They're married. They lie about their height. I figured I was just having a bad run. But after the 4th time, I started replaying the nights in my head. There was a pattern I didn't want to notice because once I did, it made everything feel weird. Every one of those dates had ended at the same dessert place. Bellwether was a little late-night cafe tucked between a wine bar and a bookstore downtown. Exposed brick, amber lights, tiny marble tables, mismatched framed paintings on the wall. The kind of place that looked romantic without trying too hard. Their tiramisu was good, their espresso martinis were better, and because it stayed open later than most places, it had become my go-to second stop if a date was going well. Dinner somewhere else, then, if things felt easy, I'd say, "Do you want to get dessert around the corner?" It made me feel smart, honestly. Public place, familiar staff, easy to leave if I wanted. Safe. I can still remember the sound of spoons hitting little glass plates there. The low jazz they always played. The smell of coffee and vanilla and sugar that seemed warm enough to sit on your skin. I remember a middle-aged guy behind the counter with graying hair and a calm face. He was there most nights. I knew him only as Vic because that was what his apron said. He was one of those people who could make friendly eye contact without seeming nosy. He once comped me a cannoli because they were closing. Another time he remembered I liked peppermint tea. If you had asked me then whether Bellwether felt dangerous, I would have laughed. The first real crack in everything came after what I think of now as date number 6. His name was Mark. He was an accountant, funny in a dry way, and wore a navy sweater that still looked too warm for October. We met for tacos and margaritas. He had kind eyes. He listened when I talked. He asked follow-up questions. By the time we walked to Bellwether, the air had that Ohio cold that isn't sharp yet, but carries a warning. Inside, the windows were fogged and the whole place glowed amber. We shared a slice of flourless chocolate cake. I had tea because I'd already had enough to drink. I remember laughing at something Mark said about his mother, using Facebook like it was a public diary. I remember going to the restroom. I remember looking at myself in the mirror and thinking I looked nice for once, flushed and relaxed, and like maybe I should stop expecting things to go wrong. After that, there's nothing. Not hazy pieces. Not flashes. Nothing. The next thing I remember is waking up in my own bed at 9:17 the next morning with my head pounding hard enough to make my teeth hurt. That wasn't totally unusual. I'd had nights where I woke up dehydrated or with makeup still on. But two things felt wrong immediately. The first was that I was fully dressed, even wearing my coat. The second was that there was dried mud on the hem of my jeans. I sat up too fast and found my right shoe on the floor by the bed. Only the right one. The left one was missing. I checked my kitchen, bathroom, couch, hallway. Nothing. Then I looked at my phone. There was a text from an unknown number sent at 2:11 a.m. You always forget what happens after dessert. I must have read that 10 times before my body caught up with my brain. I wish I could say I handled it well. I didn't. I stared at it until my hands started shaking, then called Emily, even though she lived 2 hours away and had a toddler and a life and no reason to be dragged into my weird Tuesday morning panic. She answered half asleep. "Claire, I think something happened last night. That woke her up fast. Are you hurt?" "I don't know." There was a pause. "What do you mean you don't know?" I looked down and saw a bruise blooming dark yellow and purple along the inside of my wrist, like fingers had gripped me too hard. I don't remember getting home. Emily got quiet in that careful way people do when they're trying not to scare you more. "Did you drink a lot?" "No." "Did you go home with him?" "I don't think so." "You don't think so?" That was the problem. Nothing about it sounded sane when I said it out loud. I sounded like someone trying to dress up recklessness as mystery. After I got off the phone, I checked my messages with Mark. The last ones I remembered were from earlier that evening, him sending a joke about being 5 minutes late. But there, in the thread, was a message from my number at 12:48 a.m. "Thanks for tonight. I'm not interested. Please don't contact me again." I hadn't sent that. There was no reply. My stomach turned so hard I had to sit on the bathroom floor. Then I noticed a little icon at the top of my gallery, a hidden folder I had never used. It had been turned on sometime during the night. Inside were 17 photos. They were all dark and badly framed, like they'd been taken with shaking hands. Most showed pieces of a place I didn't recognize. Wet concrete, a chain-link fence, the side of a long glass building with several panes broken out. Tall weeds shining under flash. One photo had my knee in the corner, smeared with dirt. Another showed my bare left foot. The last picture was the worst because it included enough of me to prove it was real. I was sitting in a metal chair, head tilted to one side, eyes half closed, hair falling over my face. Behind me was a table covered with a white cloth. On the table was a single plate with a slice of cake on it. I stared at that photo until the room felt wrong around me. I called off work. Then I made myself do practical things because practical things feel like railings when your mind wants to go somewhere bad. I showered. I found my missing shoe in the trunk of my car, though I had no memory of driving home. I checked my bank app. No weird charges. No rideshare receipt. Just Bellwether and a gas station on the north side of town I never used. At noon I called Mark. It went to voicemail twice. The third time he answered, sounding annoyed. Hello? Mark, it's Claire. I'm really sorry to call. I think something weird happened last night. He was quiet for a second. Yeah, he said finally. I'd say that's fair. My mouth went dry. What do you mean? Another pause, longer this time. Look, I don't want to be rude, but you seemed fine. And then after dessert, it was like a switch flipped. You got really pale. You kept staring at the front window like you were waiting for someone. Then the guy from the cafe came over and asked if you were okay. Vic? I don't know his name. Gray hair, apron. I gripped the edge of my counter. What happened after that? He said your ride was here. I asked if you wanted me to walk you out. You laughed at me. His voice changed there, not angry exactly, but embarrassed. You said, don't be dramatic, he always takes me. Then you left. I felt cold all over. Mark, I don't remember any of that. He exhaled softly. Claire, I don't know what was going on, but it freaked me out. I know. I'm sorry. Did you see the car? No. I paid and left right after. I didn't want to be part of whatever that was. Whatever that was. I thanked him and hung up. That should have been enough for me to go straight to the police. It probably would have been if I had a cleaner story. But that's the thing about this kind of fear. If your memory is full of holes, you don't even trust your own panic. You spend half your time trying to prove to yourself you're not being dramatic. I went to urgent care instead. I told them I might have been drugged. They did blood work, asked if I used recreational drugs, asked how much I'd had to drink, asked if I had a history of blackouts. By then, too much time had passed. The doctor was polite, but I could hear the skepticism tucked under her voice. She told me to follow up with my primary care doctor. Drink water. Rest. Be careful. Be careful. As if I had misplaced my keys. That evening my friend Nadia came over with Thai food and that hard, practical energy she gets when she's scared for someone she loves. Nadia and I had been friends since college. She worked in HR, had no patience for nonsense, and once returned a couch because the online photos were misleading. She listened without interrupting, then took my phone and looked through everything. She used your pronouns wrong, she said suddenly. What? In this text to Mark. You never say, I'm not interested. You always soften things. You say, I don't think we're a match, or I had a nice time but didn't feel a connection. Whoever sent this sounds meaner than you. That almost made me cry, which sounds ridiculous, but when you feel like your own mind is turning against you, a tiny familiar detail can hit harder than the scary stuff. We went through the other men I'd dated in the past few months. One had unmatched me. One had blocked my number. One replied finally with, I think it's better if we leave it there. Only one gave me anything useful. His name was Jonah. We'd gone out about 3 weeks earlier. We'd had burgers, then gone to Bellwether. When I texted and asked if anything strange had happened that night, he called me within 2 minutes. I was wondering if I should have said something, he admitted. I honestly thought maybe I imagined it. Please tell me. You were normal. Then that guy behind the counter brought over a little dish, said it was on the house because you were one of his favorites. My chest tightened. What was it? Some kind of custard. You took like 3 bites. Then you got really quiet. I closed my eyes. Did I leave with him? Yeah, kind of. Not exactly with him, more like because of him. He told me your brother was outside and you were having a panic attack. I don't have a brother. He went silent. Claire, he said, and his voice had changed in a way I still remember. "I'm really sorry. That night I didn't sleep much. Every noise in the hallway made me sit up. At 3 in the morning I got another text from the unknown number. Thursday. Don't eat anything he gives you." I nearly threw the phone. The next day Nadia and I went to Bellwether in the afternoon. In daylight it looked smaller, less romantic. Just a cafe with scratched floors and pastry cases that needed polishing. Vic was there, wiping down tables. He smiled when he saw me, and if I hadn't known what I knew, I would have thought nothing of it. "Claire," he said warmly, "haven't seen you in a while." The fact that he knew my name made my skin crawl. I forced a smile. "Been busy." Nadia squeezed my arm once, hard enough to say don't do anything stupid. We ordered coffee and sat. I watched him move behind the counter. Calm, easy, ordinary. No twitchy energy. No obvious threat. Just a man in his late 40s with clean nails and tired eyes. "Maybe it's not him," Nadia whispered. Then he looked over at me and held my gaze a second too long. Not lusty. Not friendly. Familiar. Like I belonged in a story he'd been telling himself for a long time. I wanted to leave, but before we did I went to the bathroom. On the inside of the stall door, scratched into the painted metal, was a line that looked old enough to have been missed by 100 people before me. "He takes them out the back." My whole body went cold. I showed Nadia, and this time she didn't tell me I might be overthinking. We went straight to the police station. The officer we spoke to was not cruel, which almost made it worse. He listened, took notes, asked reasonable questions. Did I have proof the texts came from the cafe owner? Did I know for sure I'd been drugged? Had any assault occurred that I knew of? Did I have footage, witnesses, a license plate? "We can document it," he said, "and we can do a welfare check if you want. But right now there's not a lot to act on." I wanted to scream. Instead I went home, locked both locks, pushed a chair under the knob like I was in a bad movie, and sat on my couch with all the lights on. At 1:14 a.m., someone tried my door. Not knocked. Not rang. Tried it. The knob turned once, slowly, then again. I froze so hard I couldn't even breathe right. The chair scraped. The metal lock rattled. Then I heard a man's voice through the wood, soft and patient. "You left your shoe with me before, remember?" I knew that voice. "Vic." I backed away so fast I nearly fell, grabbed my phone, and called 911 with hands so slippery I almost dropped it. By the time officers arrived, he was gone. My downstairs neighbor, a retired woman named Mrs. Halpern, heard the commotion and came out in her robe. When I explained, she frowned and said, "I might have him on my camera." "Hold on." Her little doorbell camera had caught him coming up the stairs. Gray jacket, ball cap, one hand in his pocket, looking directly at my door. That was the first piece of proof anyone took seriously. Police finally paid Bellwether a visit. By then Vic was gone. So was half the staff. The place closed for plumbing repairs the next day and never reopened under that name. For a normal person, maybe that would have been enough. Proof, police, an investigation. But once fear gets personal, you don't relax just because paperwork exists. You start thinking in ugly practical terms. He knew where I lived. He had used my phone. He had taken me somewhere more than once. That meant there were probably things he knew about me I didn't know he knew. I changed my passwords, stayed with Nadia, and kept getting one thought stuck in my head. Where had he taken me? I had the photos. The gas station charge. Wet concrete, broken glass, weeds. Something about the long glass building in the background kept bothering me. I knew I had seen a place like that before. Then Emily solved it by accident. I sent her one of the photos, and 10 minutes later she called. "That looks like the old Hartwell greenhouse," she said. "Didn't we pass it when Dad had to pick up mulch for Mom every spring?" I sat up so fast I hit my knee on Nadia's coffee table. The Hartwell greenhouse had shut down years ago. It sat on the north side of town behind a chain-link fence, half abandoned, visible from the road if you knew where to look. The gas station from my bank app was 4 minutes away. Police told me not to go near it. I wish I could tell you I listened. Instead, Jonah drove me there the next afternoon. because he was the only one outside my family who understood that this had become bigger than embarrassment. He said yes too quickly when I asked, which told me he'd been feeling guilty for weeks. The place looked dead. Several glass panels were missing. The parking lot was cracked and full of weeds. A faded sign still hung crooked by the gate. There was no one there. For a minute I almost felt stupid. Then we found the side door. It wasn't locked. Inside, the air smelled like wet soil and mold and old heat. The greenhouse was colder than outside. Water dripped somewhere. Broken pots were scattered across the concrete. Near the back, beyond a set of plastic strip curtains, was a room that had once maybe been used for office storage. That was where he took us. I know that now because the room was full of evidence of other women. Not bodies, not blood, nothing dramatic enough for a horror movie. It was worse than that. It looked prepared. 7 metal chairs arranged around a long folding table. White tablecloth, cheap battery candles, boxes stacked against the wall, each labeled with a number. Inside the first box I opened were women's things: lipstick, earrings, a scarf, a single flat shoe, a hotel key card, a cracked phone case with fake pearls. My hand started shaking so badly Jonah had to take the box from me. On the table sat an old digital camera. When I turned it on, there we were. Women in those chairs. Women slumped half asleep. Women posed upright with dessert plates in front of them. Some alone. Some with him leaning into frame from the side, smiling like a patient husband in a holiday photo. And me. Different nights. Different clothes. My head drooping. My eyes barely open. Mud on my shoes. Once in the chair. Once standing outside the greenhouse with his hand around my wrist. And in a folder on the camera marked 7, there were photos from the night before. My apartment building. My front door. Me through my living room window, taken from the sidewalk across the street. I think I made a sound then, something thin and ugly. Jonah grabbed my arm and said, "We have to go now." He was right, because as he said it, we heard a car outside on gravel. Everything in me went cold and empty at the same time. Jonah killed the camera screen. We stood there listening. A car door shut. Then another. Footsteps. There is no fear like the fear of realizing a person has already built a space in the world for you. A private place. A routine. A version of you that exists in their head, and maybe in photographs, and maybe in little saved objects in numbered boxes. Jonah whispered back. We moved through the greenhouse as quietly as we could, but fear makes you clumsy. My shoe slipped in mud. A broken pot cracked under Jonah's foot. The footsteps outside stopped. Then Vic's voice came from the front room, calm as ever. "Claire?" Just hearing him say my name in that tone made me feel sick. "I know it's you." We ran. Not heroically. Not cleanly. I slammed my hip into a metal cart. Jonah shoved through a warped side door that wouldn't fully open. I scraped my hand on broken glass, so badly I left blood on the frame. We stumbled out into the weeds behind the greenhouse. There was a fence 6 feet high, with rusted wire bent outward at the top. Jonah went first, boosting himself over. I tried, slipped, and felt a hand close around my ankle. I looked down and saw Vic through the fence. Up close he looked older, red around the eyes. Furious in a way that was somehow quieter than shouting would have been. "You keep ruining it," he said. I kicked hard, harder than I knew I could, caught him in the shoulder, and scrambled up as Jonah hauled me over from the other side. We hit the ground running. I lost one shoe again. I remember that, stupidly. I remember thinking, not again, not this stupid shoe, as if my brain had latched onto something small because the bigger thing was too much. Jonah had already called 911. We cut across a drainage ditch and into the road just as a patrol car turned in, faster than I would have thought possible for somewhere that empty. I don't remember much after that except sitting on the curb wrapped in somebody's blanket while officers shouted near the greenhouse and an ambulance checked my hand. Vic tried to leave through the front in his car. They stopped him before he made it to the road. The investigation took months. He wasn't the owner of Bellwether. He managed nights and had worked there for years. They found sedatives in a locked cabinet at the cafe, hidden under tea tins. They found clone phone chargers, spare SIM cards, old customer reservation books, and a stack of printed photos from women's social media pages. Mine among them. He had been drugging women selectively, usually ones who came in often enough for him to study. He learned schedules, names, dating habits. He texted from burner numbers to keep fear alive. He used their phones while they were sedated, sending messages, deleting call logs, turning off location history. Sometimes he took them home. Sometimes he took them to the greenhouse. The police eventually told me that several women came forward after the arrest. 2 remembered nothing. One remembered waking up in her parked car with dirt under her nails and thinking she had sleepwalked somehow. Another had found photos on her phone and convinced herself she must have taken them drunk. That was the part that kept me up more than anything, how close we all came to explaining it away. There was never a single satisfying motive. Real monsters are disappointing like that. He told investigators different things at different times. Sometimes it was about making perfect memories. Sometimes it was about women who wasted chances. Once he said he liked the moment when they realized something was wrong, but didn't trust themselves enough to say it. That, more than anything, still makes my skin crawl. Because he was right about one thing. I didn't trust myself. Not at first. For a long time after, normal things felt contaminated. Dessert menus. Tea. Small cafes with amber lighting. Men saying, "Do you want to go somewhere else?" Even in a perfectly innocent way. I couldn't sleep if I didn't check the locks 3 times. I moved apartments. I changed jobs because my old commute passed too close to downtown. Emily started texting me every night, just a moon emoji, nothing else, and I'd text one back, so she knew I was home. I did therapy. I got better. Mostly. But there are still pieces of those nights I'll never get back. The exact route to the greenhouse. How many times he took me there. Whether I ever tried to fight him while drugged, or if I just smiled and followed, because that's what sedatives can do to a body, turn you into something pliant and unreal. Once, about a year later, detectives returned my phone after extracting what they needed. In the Notes app there was a draft I had never seen before, saved at 1:03 a.m. on one of the nights I disappeared. It only said this: "If I forget again, check after dessert." I stared at that line for a long time. I must have written it during some tiny window when I knew enough to be afraid, but not enough to escape. Some last clean second in the fog, when I understood what was happening and tried to leave a breadcrumb for the version of me that would wake up the next morning and doubt everything. I think about that version of me a lot. The woman sitting in nice clothes under warm cafe lights, laughing with someone harmless, believing she was in control because the place was public and familiar and pretty. The woman who felt herself getting tired and told herself she was probably just stressed. The woman who let politeness win over instinct again and again because nothing had gone wrong enough yet. Sometimes the scariest part isn't that someone dangerous crossed your path. It's how easily they can build a routine around you before you realize you're part of it. So if something feels wrong, if your memories blur in the same place, if your body keeps bringing home evidence your mind can't explain, listen to that. Don't wait for the story to become dramatic enough to deserve belief. Don't wait for a bruise to darken or a stranger to touch your doorknob in the middle of the night. People like that don't need a reason. They just need an opening. And sometimes all that opening is you telling yourself you're probably fine, right up until dessert. If you made it this far, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell for more stories that might just keep you up at night.